Seeing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Everyone in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Next up is approval of consent agenda. Right now there should be 2 items on there. The meeting minutes for the April 22nd meeting, which is called out, and then the April 8th meeting as well. Are there any changes to those before we would move on those? Seeing none, I take a motion to approve. Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next up is community comment. During this time, anyone in the audience is feel free to come forward, talk about whatever they want to talk about. I would ask, though, that none of this is, if it's on the agenda at a later point, we can get to that later. So if you want to come forward, you can do that right now. Seeing none, I'd take a motion to close the community comment.
Motion to close community comment.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So next up, there's 4 public hearings tonight. The first one is a subdivision for Frank Bierman, which I believe has been here at least twice previously. And Carrie, if you want to introduce that, I would ask tonight if we could make it as short and sweet as possible. I know we've went through many things on this, and personally I would just like to hear what has changed and why we should consider it coming back. If there's other questions, we can certainly ask those, but I would ask that from the applicant and both the city of what's really changed here. I think people have got the gist of it after a couple of meetings of what we're talking about. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. That is what we intend to do. So this is an item, and actually let me start by saying while this is listed as a public hearing, you have closed the public hearing.
Oh, right, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah,
that was, we had actually 2 public hearings on it, right?
Correct.
2 meetings before, and it was closed at the last meeting.
Right. So apologize for that on the agenda. I didn't catch that till just now. So this was tabled by the Commission for the applicant to go back and make some revisions to the grading and drainage plan. They have done that. Ross Bintner from our engineering staff is going to take you through some of those changes and explain how the grading and drainage will work. The applicant still is requesting flexibility on conditions 3, 5, and 6 in Ross's review memo, and that is in regard to the curbing type, the sidewalk, and the looping of the water. And Ross will talk a little bit about that, the pros and cons. Staff, just to remind the Commission, staff is recommending approval of the subdivision. This is a plat that meets all of our minimum lot size, width, and depth requirements, so the applicant is entitled this subdivision, and that's subject to those findings and conditions that are in the staff memo attached. So with that, I will introduce Ross Bintner from our engineering department, and he will take you through the grading and drainage plan and talk through some of those changes.
Welcome, Ross.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Commission. You're all very familiar with the plans now, so I'll cut right to the chase on what changed and describe the drainage. And then I'll hand it over to Chad on the 3 issues that we described last time as a matter of policy: the water main, the living streets policy, and the other one. On the drainage, the applicant has submitted a stormwater management report, and the engineering department has put a memo in your packet that conditions the approval. Relative to the prior application, our comments are relatively minor. The drainage from the site currently flows off in a couple different directions. One is to the west, and then the other to the south and southeast. There's a minor area of the drainage that heads off to Blake Road right now. The site also accepts drainage in larger storm events from the northeast, from a couple lots along Evanswood Lane. In the future condition, the drainage patterns remain much the same. The applicant proposes to capture drainage from the road in 3 separate rain gardens along the road, and then in a rain garden that's in the center median of the cul-de-sac. They also propose to capture a small amount of drainage from their lot number 7 in another rain garden north of the cul-de-sac. When we look at the peak rates and volumes that come off of a site before and after a development, we often compare situations where the land use goes from a forested condition or a lightly developed condition to something that has more impervious surface, more hard cover from driveways, rooftops, and roadway. All of those surfaces generate a lot more and quicker runoff than the existing conditions, so the applicant designs different precautions to store, detain, and slowly drain off the runoff. So the 3 rain gardens are part of that strategy in the applicant's design. In the past application, it was through rain gardens at each one of these locations, and in addition, rain gardens on the southeast corner of Lot 7 and in the drainage path on Lot 5 on the west side of the property. 2 of the rain gardens from the previous application have gone away, and the overall storage of the site has increased with an underground detention and infiltration feature. One of the challenges of this site are the poor clayey type soils on the surface. So to help the case for controlling the total amount of volume from the runoff, the applicant is proposing to tap into a sand layer that sits a little bit deeper in the site through over excavating and filling clean, drainable sand underneath the footprint of this under road storage structure. So both the under road storage structure and the series of rain gardens provide that detention and storage that meet our rate and volume control requirements, and in the engineer's calculation are protective of the downstream body. Another important point from the last meeting was that the applicant secure rights to drain down to this site. Currently it's private property, and the nearest public system is attached to the same pond, but doesn't include the pond itself. So they are proposing some sort of an easement over private property now, and they're working to get that. We've seen some evidence that they're moving towards that, but my memo conditions that that future public easement. So I think that that summarizes the drainage fairly well. I could stand for any questions if you have any. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Chad Milner, our Director of Engineering, to discuss the other 3 issues.
Any questions for Mr. Bittner? Mr. Hobbs?
Yeah, Ross, do you have the whole plan set in front of you?
Yes.
Can you go to C7.4? And just if you could, there's the cross-section of how the rain garden works. Can you just describe that for me and for the audience of how that will function and where that's located?
In the applicant's design, the street is shown on the right side of this detail on 7.4.
Could you zoom in on that a little bit more, if you could? Yeah, maybe we still can't quite get the lettering, but see a little bit better.
So the streets here, they propose to flow it overland and into the rain garden. The rain garden has a depression that can fill. So initially it would fill up those areas, and then it would also percolate into an amended soil. There's also a gravel or a rock storage layer there and an underdrain. Water could remain in the area above the drain and slowly percolate into the ground. Mm-hmm. These are sited very near the over-excavation for the road, the under road structure. So I'd imagine there'd be some hydrologic connection for the water sweeping in there. And then the drain can connect on to the nearby system.
So the underground detention structure they're proposing would be connected to these rain gardens?
Potentially, and that's, I think, a detail that can be worked out in the final design,
Okay.
but it would sit somewhere underneath this curb line. This isn't to scale vertically, but it would be somewhere down in this area.
Okay. And then the drain pipe that's exiting off to the left of the drawing, what is that? Not the one up on the left near the retaining wall. There you go. So what is that draining?
That refers to sheet 4.1. There are a variety of under drains in the rain gardens. There's one running down the center line here. There's also some running over to the rain gardens in the road.
Okay.
Because these will be sited, will be sited in clay materials. They want to make sure that it's able to drain away so that it's at least water underground and available for the roots and not flooding out plants.
Okay. So so that drain is not going to, just want to make sure in that drawing, it's not bypassing the rain garden. There's still water that's going to be entering into the rain garden.
Yeah, so generally we talk about both filtration and infiltration.
Mm-hmm.
So everything would pass through that soil layer of the rain garden, filtration process. A portion of the water that filters also is infiltrated. It sits below the elevation of the pipe.
Okay. And then in terms of the vegetation that's going to be planted in the rain gardens, have we gotten to that level of detail yet? Or
I think I saw a landscape plan, but I didn't pay a lot of attention to that. So it really wouldn't bear on the design. We're looking more at infiltration rates and volumes and area right now.
Okay.
You had some suggestions for some plants, didn't you?
Well, I mean, it's what we talked about before. I mean, certainly using grasses in the rain garden obviously helps a little bit in terms of being able to use evapotranspiration as one means of getting rid of some of the water.
I have it open to the landscape plan now. It should be in the plans provided.
So I just, I mean, that's just one comment. There's some kind of, standard best management practices of what to plant in rain gardens. Obviously, I'm assuming you guys are going to do what makes sense to plant in a rain garden that works to help get the water to not cause a problem. Thanks.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Carr?
Just a question. You mentioned that the applicants are seeking flexibility in conditions 3, 5, and 7. Now, I think that you meant item 6, because that's the looped.
Hey, Claudia, can we hang
Yeah,
on to
keep-
that for a second? I think Mr. Milner's going to speak to that in a minute, so maybe if we could speak to Ross on any groundwater for a second.
Okay, that's
Does that
fine.
make
yeah.
sense?
Yep, that's fine.
'Cause I have a couple questions for Ross.
Okay.
Commissioner Nemiroff?
Thanks for the presentation. Could you explain over time, the technical and legal measures that will continue to maintain the rain gardens operational as they are upon construction?
Thank you. Yes. With every practice or drainage pipe, someone has to be responsible to own and inspect and maintain the systems in perpetuity because they provide a public benefit and their continued function maintains that public benefit. So typically the city defers to the watershed district for all clean water or water quality functions. And we would have some sort of an agreement with the homeowners association in favor of the watershed districts for the rain gardens and their maintenance. So the ongoing inspection of those facilities would be done by people who presumably have the expertise to know a succeeding rain garden versus a failing one. But the overall flood management systems and storage and drainage systems are the purview of the city. They become part of our municipal separate storm sewer system, and we are obligated under state permit and just best practices to protect health, life, and safety to maintain those continually. We have run an inspection program where we're viewing 20% of the system per year, so every 5 years at the very minimum we're coming out and inspecting pieces of the system, making sure that it's continually functioning, it's not being clogged up. We've got maintenance crews who work with these type of systems at all times. They've got big jetter and vector trucks, and they can get in those pipes and look around with cameras, and they can clean them out. So the city is well resourced to provide those services for maintenance.
Thanks, Ross. And then if there are, it sounds like there will be standard ongoing costs and perhaps one-time ongoing costs depending what the watershed district finds when it inspects them. Who will incur those costs?
For the public facilities, the drain pipes, the under road storage system, the downstream drains, those are publicly held costs, maintenance costs. For the continual function of the rain garden, those would be liabilities of the homeowners association and would be under the purview of the watershed district to enforce.
So I guess one final follow-up. Is there a homeowners association? Will there be a homeowners association with regard to this development?
The developers agreement, the first condition in my memorandum talks about the public and private ownership and maintenance. That would be a final product of the developers agreement at the time of final plat.
Sorry, I know I said one final follow-up. So will that be on the property title then? Do we know, or?
A little outside my area of expertise there, but I'm
Okay.
almost certain that homeowners association would be attributed to each one of the properties in their title, and it's a separate legal structure that they're all a part of.
Thanks, Ross.
What else? Commissioner Lee?
Ross, in that one drawing where you had the red lines, those are pipes, you said, that would be laid underneath the street? It's kind of a backup catch-all system for additional capacity for stormwater. So you said that this is going to be laid in the layer that was sand? Is that what you said? Is there an existing layer of sand?
Yes, in the soil borings, the applicant points to a layer that's granular and drainable and not part of groundwater in their soils reports, and they're proposing to tap into that. That's kind of a key piece of their design.
Okay, so that have confirmed the existence of that sand layer.
Yes, soils borings have been taken throughout the road section and then at each house pad to enable the engineer to do his work.
Okay, so this red piping, and again, that's probably a pretty good point. The question is that cost of that piping is being picked up by the applicant, or the city would lay that piping?
All of these improvements would be part of the developer's responsibility as part of the development agreement.
But once it's in place, then now
The
repair,
long-term
maintenance, and
yes.
stuff becomes part of the city. Okay, thank you.
So that piping would become city property, or however you want to, just
Yes.
like you've done for some other subdivisions around town where you've taken over that once it's been built, correct?
Yeah, we find it's a best practice to take public ownership of water main, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, where we have core competencies and can keep it functioning. To try to put these type of facilities onto a homeowners association would, get them involved
Be
with
tough, yeah.
inspectors and engineers, and we'd still end up doing a lot of the, prodding to make sure that happens. For the clean water functions and the rain garden functions, those are things that the watershed district has goals on specifically. So we have an enforcer outside the organization there.
So what happens to drainage from the property on the, I guess it'd be northeast corner here? Does that tie into this system? I see there's there's a pipe going that way. What does that mean, and what rights does the adjacent property owners have?
If you zoom in on this lot here,
Well, right to the, where it says A,
Yeah,
That
you're referring to the property on Evanswood Lane.
Correct.
So in our
That isn't part of the development
that's
right
right.
now.
In our review memo, we asked that the applicant provide a stormwater management report that describes that there's no net increase in risk or decrease in risk for upstream and downstream properties. And upstream properties, we're referring to a low area that pools right here. We've had discussions with this property owner and have heard his concerns, but we're not putting any additional requirements on the applicant to treat drainage or provide drainage for something that's outside of their development. But they do have to make sure that that increase, or that there's no increase in risk. Because in the previous condition, and I showed you this early, they showed the existing condition, water draining on from this this portion of the site into that low area that's on private property. The applicant addressed that risk and the additional impervious that they're building in that small sub-watershed by creating an approximately 2-foot deep swale along the east property line of Lot 7. When it gets to the low area here, it turns into a berm and comes off the property line a little bit more. They provide an emergency overflow so that water in this basin builds up to no higher and then drains into a public drain that connects into that future underground storage chamber.
So there's an 8-inch line going over there right now. What's that for?
This pipe here?
Yeah, at least on
Yep.
that's sheet C 4.2. There's an 8-inch line that just goes there and stops, as I understand it.
That's right.
Or is that catch basin?
Yeah, so there would be approximately 2-foot deep catch basin at this location that would transmit water under the road and into the storage chambers.
Is a storage facility accounting for runoff from that property?
That's not something that I was able to ascertain from my review, but my conditions will include that they've described the risk satisfactorily. Right now, I'm not concerned at all that it's that they would need any, or that there's anything that would materially affect a preliminary plat here. But we want to see that the risk has been well defined there. I also only had a couple days to review it, so I may have missed it. If you get clarification from
I
the
couldn't tell if
applicant.
that went into that property or just was a catch basin that was sitting there I couldn't tell how much was draining there. Okay.
Yeah, it's still in the public right of way, but there's also drainage and utility easement in that corner as well.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Forrest?
To follow up on that, the homeowner of that northeast property, I understand, has been pumping water out of his yard. And so where has he been pumping it to, and where will he be able to pump it to in the future?
As
It's
it's
going
been
to Evanswood Lane. It's been pumped to Evanswood Lane at the top, on the
So
north side.
He'll be pumping it uphill to,
Well, that's where it had been pumping to before.
okay.
Thanks. Welcome, Chad.
Thanks, Commissioners. Chad Milner, Director of Engineering. A few final points here to discuss from the updated memo. Item number 3 was consider the living streets policy for the sidewalk. And many of these other ones, at a staff level, we could live with it, but we're not going to recommend it. We'll let the council decide whether or not they're going to go and consider these last 3 points. So if you look at our Living Streets Principle number 6, this is what staff is using for our recommendation. City will require new developments to provide an interconnected street and sidewalk network that connect to the existing or planned streets or sidewalks on the perimeter of development. Well, Blake Road has sidewalks. We did recommend a sidewalk in our original memos. We could live without one, but we figured we'll let the council decide how to implement this Living Streets policy principle number 6. On the curb and gutter, again, since 2007, we've had nothing but barrier-type curb in town when we've had new developments and also our own street reconstruction program. There are instances of surmountable curb or the flat drive-over curb they're proposing here. We're not going to recommend that. Here's an example of why, at a staff level, we don't want to recommend it. We get people putting in these little plastic things to keep cars off their yards. The lawns tend to go bad and stuff like that. So we try to shy away from this. The pavement lasts longer when there's an edger, and their curb will have an edge on there, so we're not concerned with pavement life. But it's more of the aesthetics of having cars drive on those lawn areas. So again, that's a decision that we'd rather have the council decide on, that we weren't able to come to an agreement on.
Do you think they can effectively drain to the rain gardens, though, as with that curb you're proposing?
Yeah, there is. There's options that we feel might even improve some of the sediment catching. If you put a barrier curb on there, you have a small catch basin with a pipe that outlets now into the rain garden. You catch that sediment in a defined structure. We have our big vac trucks that come out and suck the sediment out versus the maintenance that the homeowners association is going to have to try to deal with that sediment that would run right off the street into the rain garden. So we think it simplifies the maintenance on the homeowners association and just puts the sediment removal, which is one of our standard practices around town, and puts it on us. So the type of curb won't short circuit what they have in place. It'll require a few extra storm structures and a little bit more pipes into the rain gardens. The third topic was the water main. We ran various water main pressures and fire flow scenarios. It is correct that we can, this is the wrong one, we can meet fire flow requirements with a dead end water main, 8-inch dead end that they have proposed. We have other ones in town, but we also have issues with stagnant water. So if you see on here, we're going to meet with an 8-inch dead end, almost 2,700 gallons per minute fire flow. You typically want to get above 1,000, above 1,200 to meet minimum fire standards. So it's not a question of fire flows, but if we look at and here's another map showing the additional fire protection where we can go down to a 6-inch along the road and loop it into Evanswood. And if you look at the AWWA Waterworks Association standards for water transmission, right here it says mains are sized to adequate fire flow. We meet that requirement in either case. The one we're concerned about, in 5-10 years, who's going to get the calls is the public works officials saying my water is stagnant or degrades because it's a dead-end water main. All these homes are going to have low-flow fixtures. There's only 5 or 6 homes, and we anticipate getting these calls. Now's our opportunity to put in the loop and keep us from getting those future calls. And in some cases, it gets so bad that we now have to go back in and put water main in. We believe there's a way to put the water main in without damaging the trees. It's horizontal drilling, which is a practice we do quite often. So on the curb, the water main, and the sidewalk, we feel those policy decisions should be made by the council. And I'll have to stand for any questions on those 3 at this time.
Questions from Mr. Milner? Nope, thanks. Oh, Commissioner Forrest.
Back to the sidewalk. I'm a huge proponent of Living Streets policy, but I see that as a bag of tricks that you can use, and it's a number of principles, and it's impractical and not appropriate necessarily to have every street in town aim for the Living Streets side cut image that we see in a lot these days. I guess my concern about the sidewalk is you're putting it in on the north side of the street. The houses are primarily, well, they're on the cul-de-sac and then the south side of the street. I don't think it would get used much, except maybe it could be a trike path. I'm not sure. But it won't connect really very well to Blake because on Blake, the sidewalk's on the other side of the street, and there's no crosswalk, and it's on a hill. So it's not a particularly visible place to cross safely anyway, especially, not saying that people won't cross there, but I don't see it as really true connectivity of sidewalks in that way, because it's not something that you could send your 6-year-old out to use the crosswalk, because it wouldn't be a safe situation. So I'm just wondering how emphatic you are feeling about including that.
Yeah, Commissioner Forrest, of the three issues, this is probably the least one. We could definitely live without this, with only being 5 homes. And you usually want the sidewalks on the side where the trips are generated. This one would be on the north side. This is one of the items we felt we definitely could live with, but it's right here in the principle. So we thought, council may have a different understanding when they approve this policy that no, we want it in all developments. Maybe they don't. This one we could definitely live without the sidewalk. Yep.
Commissioner Lee?
I don't know if this is the time to ask, but the bar report, is that for Ross?
Sure, on
or-
the stormwater.
Yeah, it
review?
showed up last time we didn't really get to discuss it much. But my question is, have the points that were identified in the memo of April, whatever it was, have been addressed adequately to your satisfaction? Maybe it's Ross, sorry.
All right,
Yeah,
Commissioner
it was
Lee?
your March 30th memo, sorry.
I relied on BAR to review this latest iteration of the application, and I had received a May 6th memorandum from them. And generally, they called to my attention, some critical points of the design, but they didn't have any reservations that were repeated from the list that you saw in the previous Planning Commission meeting.
So you have no reservations, the points 12 through 17, second page of your memo, of the hydrology concerns?
And if I do, I have a condition in there that the final plat will be able to adequately address the risk conversation, and the sizing of their infrastructure will adjust accordingly.
That was also reviewing the previous design, wasn't
What was that? I'm
it?
sorry.
That bar memo was reviewing the previous design.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm. Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Don't go far. Maybe something will come up. You don't have to be home tonight, do you? I don't know if the applicant has anything to add to all this, briefly, if anything. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be brief. I do appreciate staff's willingness to meet quickly with us after the last meeting and review our revised plans. As they mentioned, we have a compliant plat, and we comply with all city ordinance requirements. But we do have 3 issues that are policy issues, and we continue to ask for your support for modifications to those 3 recommendations. And we do think there's significant issues. In particular, we think that the looping of the water main, and I wanted to mention this one specifically because there is no life safety issue, there is no fire safety issue, and there's no evidence that there's a water quality issue. We do a lot of these types of pipes in small subdivisions like this that are dead ends. We're very comfortable. We wouldn't be building homes of this quality if we had any concerns about the water quality. And to loop it, the important objection that we have is that we believe it'll cause the unnecessary removal of at least 13 mature trees. And unnecessary being the key word, and while I think you can do some direct boring, there is no one who will say that that won't result in tree loss. And as you know from your tree preservation ordinance, when we're looking at tree removal, all of those things are factors. So we're very concerned about the looping of the water main. Any tree removal that would happen if that were a condition, we wash our hands of. We've been trying really hard to preserve trees. And then lastly, we do think that the curb and gutter issue and the sidewalk issue are tied. We really believe that the stormwater design works best with that ribbon curb, which is a very common tool. That image probably wasn't really reflective of our design, and that ribbon curve does provide a visual aid to drivers and guests where the edge of the street is. So we're very confident, and we do ask your consideration for these 3 modifications, but again, do thank staff for working with us. We have a plan that works, that complies with the ordinance. Thank you.
Commissioner Forrest.
So, in comparing the ribbon curb with the situation that our engineer described, why is that the ribbon curb so much superior?
The ribbon curb allows the sheet draining off the water to flow off of the street directly into the rain garden, rather than creating infrastructure that needs to be maintained. There's a construction cost and a maintenance cost associated with that. I think industry preference is to sheet drain in terms of effectiveness of managing that runoff. He is correct, that's another method. It simply has additional installation and maintenance costs for that type of more constructed solution rather than a more natural solution to stormwater management.
Thank you. So I'd take the discussion back up here. We have a motion in front of us with the subdivision as in the city staff report for that piece. So curious any comments or discussion or motions or whatever people's pleasure may be in this. Commissioner Carr.
I just wanted to compliment the applicant and the engineering department for working together to come up with what appears to be a good solution to the issues, and I would vote in favor of the application with the conditions outlined.
Commissioner, yes.
Carrie, I was just going to ask on the conditions. I got my reading glasses back on. For like condition 2, where we refer to the engineering memo, we have March 30th. Do we also need to refer to May 8th and February 19th? Because it seems like we have a variety of, are they all cumulative or?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion.
So
If you would refer to Ross's his latest memo, or include that to the list.
And also February 19th, it looks like that is where we kind of talk about some of the homeowners agreements or developer agreements. Or is that one not necessary anymore?
They should all be covered in his last
Okay.
memo.
All right. Thanks.
Commissioner Lee.
Chair, could you clarify, did you say we were going to have some discussion, or are we having the discussion now? Or
This is a discussion.
Okay,
I mean,
we're in the
if you want some
discussion.
discussion on it, I mean, if somebody wants to make a motion, that's fine too, but something has to happen here, so.
Okay, I do have some points. I feel that ultimately, the issue of the maintenance that the city is going to bear from this will be significant. There is just not simply install it and done. I have some reservations about, we keep referring to the developer, but truly these pads get developed, then they could potentially be sold off to different builders. So I think there's some logistical issues about forming a homeowners association that's all well coordinated. And even some of the requirements that we put on at this point really can only apply to the plat itself, the building pad, those kinds of things. Beyond that, to me, there are a lot of things that still have to come into play. I guess I personally would sort of err on the side of the city. I do realize that the applicant has said, for example, the horizontal drilling, they wash their hands of the trees, but the city is not fortunate enough to be able to wash their hands of the looped consequences or not going with the looped. And if that has been their experience, in my case, I think I'm leaning a little more on that side. So prior to actually crafting a motion, I guess I would say that I would probably want to have some clarifications or qualifications, conditions on those, the 3, 6, and 7. I find the following considerations to be influential in evaluating my overall support for the applicant's subdivision request. There is the potential, 1, for negative impact of the proposed development on the environment, including but not limited to the topography of that parcel, the steep slopes, the vegetation, and naturally occurring water storage needs on, to, and from this site. 2, the negative impact of the proposed subdivision on the health, safety, and general welfare of the northernmost abutting properties. We have seen where swales are used, and I think that there are some cases where they work very well, but it's not always a guaranteed conclusion. Is it possible to build right to the property line and be responsible with only what happens on your property? I think there is, it's never that black and white. The relationship of the 7 lots in the proposed plat to existing Blake Road and the inadequacy and safety of vehicular egress from the proposed street to existing Blake Road. So I did take a drive up there, and it was very, very difficult to come out there. It's difficult to come out of there off of Evanswood. So now we're putting another street in, or potentially looking at putting one several yards down. I think that's problematic. It is my conclusion that the physical characteristics of the property are such that portions of this property have always served during certain times of the year as naturally occurring wetlands and are simply not suitable for the intensity of the development being proposed. The choice to develop the parcel to the maximum 7 plats seems to me to be a bit short-sighted and almost certain to impact the stormwater management of the surrounding area in some way. Had the applicant been open to 5 or 6 plats, stormwater, thereby retaining some of the natural topography for stormwater retention on the site, as the property currently functions today, would have at least allowed me a chance to potentially support their request. And finally, the proposed subdivision has a cost in environmental damage beyond just what the owner alone will be asked to bear. I believe that a planning commissioner for the city of Edina, first and foremost, should honor the needs and rights of our residents to maintain a quality of residential life that is unsurpassed. This involves good stewardship and careful consideration of how future development, both commercial and residential, shall or shall not proceed, and its effect on existing surrounding property owners. Whereas property owners do have the right to use and enjoy their properties as they see fit, they do not have the right to adversely affect the current quality of life for so many others. So my understanding is that the applicant's proposal will require the existing residents and the city to incur the following: loss of a significant overstory tree canopy, which is integral to defining the character of the area, and character is a consideration. Daily impact by new automobile traffic serving 7 additional households, in particular a problem for the northernmost abutting properties, which will now have a street in front and behind them. I took a look, and there are very, very few isolated incidences of this anywhere in Edina, and generally it's because they border commercial areas. Maintenance and infrastructure costs to support a new street, and we sort of heard some of the items and the issues. And lastly, bearing the costs of negative consequence as a result of any failure in the proposed stormwater assumptions being made by the applicant, such as potential flooding of basements, flooding of the streets, etc. And so for these reasons, I cannot support the applicant's proposal for subdivision at this time.
Commissioner Carr.
Commissioner Lee, just a question. I'm not sure how the number of lots might impact your assessment. Right now, let's say there were 5 lots instead of 7. I mean, the drainage and stormwater issue has been addressed in the current plan. So reducing the number of lots, I don't think is necessarily going to make a difference in that regard. It certainly would impact traffic, but I don't know if that's significant. So maybe you could explain to me why you think reducing the number of lots would make a significant difference.
Yep. The idea behind reduction of lots is really to bring a little more a permeable surface and allow it to be more diffuse. So if there are fewer lots, in theory you could, well, as the most simplest example, if you took lot 7 and said simply that's going to be a holding pond and not be developed. Obviously, that's probably not realistic, so you would take that overall area and divide it among the others, and now suddenly you have more area to work with as far as for simple drainage, which is stormwater drainage, which is currently how that property functions. So that's the idea behind less permeable, less impervious surface.
Certainly.
And Planner Teague, maybe you could just refresh my memory again on the requirements for a subdivision, what the requirements are that have to be met by the applicant for a subdivision. I know some of those may be subjective, but
they are required to meet the the median lot size in terms of area, width, and depth, and that's determined by all properties within 500 feet. They've run that calculation, and the plat that's in front of you meets all of our minimum lot size standards. They've presented a grading drainage plan that's acceptable to our engineering staff, so we believe they're entitled 7 lots here with the road constructed as proposed.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nemeroff.
Commissioner Lee, I had another clarifying question about the number of your thoughts about a reduced number of lots. Are you also thinking that a reduced number of lots would enable a different form of drainage that would result in less ongoing cost to the city to maintain the drainage?
I think some of those costs are inherent regardless of the number of lots. So, no, I think that it's strictly to allow, it's really an issue of density I'm speaking of.
Any other comments? Commissioner Forrest?
It's just a little bit, I'm just wondering, was there ever any other layout considered for the street? Because I remember, Commissioner Lee reminded me about the concerns some of the neighbors had about no longer having any privacy in their backyard.
I'm certain the applicant took a look and had several alternatives, but when they came forward with a plat that met code, they were going to go with that.
Commissioner Olson?
Can I make a motion?
You can
Or are
do
we
as you
still
wish.
discussing?
You can do as you
Okay.
wish.
I'm going to need, as always, need help with this. I'm going to recommend approval, subject to the conditions and the staff report, with the edit of condition number 2 to include February 19th and May 8th engineering memos. I know there's a condition number 9 that states compliance with city's living streets policies, and I'm thinking that I'm kind of in agreement that we don't need a sidewalk on this. I totally support that. I love sidewalks, but I think, so maybe remove that condition, but then also do we have to do anything in reference to the city engineer's memo, or that just is consideration? Or
You could add a
good?
specific
Okay.
condition that says you don't believe a sidewalk is
All right.
necessary here.
So I would remove condition 9, and then, but I am including yes to the curb and yes to the loop.
I'm sorry, just clarifying that. It should be number 3, right? In the May 8th memo?
Number 3. Yeah, well, see,
The latest memo is May 8th. Isn't that the one we should be referring to in the
I think you need all
motion?
of them because there's other conditions.
Okay,
But
which
there's-
one should we refer to? Because May 8th has all these conditions in it,
The May 8th engineering memo.
so the May 8th
Okay, so we
one.
don't,
Yeah.
So
so
that-
that covers everything from the other one? Oh, that's
That
what I was
does.
asking before, so.
Yeah, so that's the latest and greatest, and that covers everything.
Oh,
Covers
okay.
all the other ones,
Oh,
so
good. Okay,
it's
then we're-
actually condition number 3 on that one. Well, it's considered
Yeah.
living streets, however,
Yeah.
and they're interpreting as needing sidewalks.
But staff condition number 9 is saying compliance.
Far,
Okay.
pardon?
Well, typically, we refer to, if we're going to
Oh,
refer to any
you're right.
conditions, it's the ones
Yeah,
in the
okay,
staff
I'm losing
report,
track too
which
here,
are,
which-
include the engineers, yeah.
Yes.
All right,
yes.
so good. If as long
Referring
as
to
the
the
most
memo.
recent engineering memo covers all the other conditions that they had, then we can just do the most recent one. But I support the curb and the loop, lot main loop.
Commissioner Carr?
So are we referring to the conditions in the engineering report? Or we're referring to the conditions in the staff report?
Staff report, right.
And then
That was
noticed-
that was the original application, correct? So the staff report would be, of May 8th would be in addition to that, correct?
Correct.
So we get this right.
So you would be stating compliance with the Director of Engineering's memo dated May 8th.
Yeah, that would just be one of the conditions that
Yep.
got put in there then, right?
Yep, and then you would add a condition that you don't believe a sidewalk is necessary here.
Yeah. Commissioner Carr?
Well, it's a technicality, but the staff report said compliance with the city's Living Streets policy, and the engineer's report phrased it somewhat differently, consider Living Streets policy in design of street. Maybe I'd prefer that instead,
Right, so we would
especially in
strike
view of the various
condition
comments
9.
we've had. So if we could replace it with that, that would be a friendly amendment to your motion.
Is that acceptable? Okay. Is there a second to the motion? Second. So if motion second, is there any further discussion? Jackie, if we could take a roll vote.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye. So I have it. Motion carries 7-2. Thank you.
This will move to the City Council on June 2nd.
On June 2nd, this goes to City Council, so at that time, this will come up again. It'll be another public hearing on this, correct? So people can come again at that point. So next up is a variance for Karen and Bill Kelly at 4504 Sunnyside Road. Miss Aker will be presenting.
Past presentations.
Yeah, I have.
And in the past.
It's okay. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, the subject property is located at 4504 Sunnyside Road. The request is for a front portico for Karen Kelly. The subject property is on the north side of Sunnyside Road. It consists of a two-story home with a detached two-car tandem garage. The existing home is in the Historic Country Club District, which any time there is a change to the front facade, it does require a certificate of appropriateness through the Heritage Preservation Board. The proposal is this is the existing home as it looks today. What they would like to do is add a front entry portico basically in front of where the stonework is, in front of the house, out to where the steps are, and this is a rendering of what they would like to accomplish. The zoning ordinance allows for porches to overlap into the front yard setback. The homes along Sunnyside are relatively lined up. This home does line up with homes on either side. The maximum intrusion into the front yard area for a portico is 80 square feet. Given the size of this portico, it is 8 square feet over the allowable encroachment amount because they would like to keep the design consistent with the stonework that they have on the exterior and the way it would look with the front face of the home as it exists today. The Heritage Preservation Board has approved a certificate of appropriateness, so they've already reviewed and approved this plan. Anytime there's a change to the front face of a home in the Country Club District, it does require that the Heritage Preservation Board review the request. If it also needs a variance, which in this particular case the project does, it always goes in front of the board or in front of the Heritage Preservation Board first, so that the Planning Commission has their review done first and understands their how they look at the project. Here's a more technical view of the plan. So the question then becomes, is the proposed variance justified? Are there practical difficulties with complying with the ordinance? It is reasonable to expect that 8 square feet is a minimal variance. It shouldn't have any negative effect on the streetscape. Spacing between homes are not compromised. If you looked at some of the neighbors directly adjacent as well as within the district, you will notice that it is not uncommon to see front entry porticos on many of the homes. Many of them are larger, some of them are smaller, but it's not inconsistent to see an improvement such as this. Staff does recommend approval of the variance. It's very minimal. The proposed use of the property is reasonable. It just slightly alters the front facade, but does improve it. It has been approved by the Heritage Preservation Board. Any approval should be subject to the plans presented and approved by the Heritage Preservation Board. With that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Ms. Aker? Thanks, Chris. Seeing none. So would the applicant like to make any comments? Nothing? Okay. So this is a public hearing, so anyone can step forth and make comments to this. If you would, if you could come forward right now. Seeing none, I'd take a motion to close.
Motion to close public hearing.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. So next up to commission for comments, motions, questions.
Planner Aker, could you let us know whether or not any neighbors commented on the proposal?
I did not receive any comments. I don't know if there were comments that were shared at the Heritage Preservation Board, but they had the first look at it, so. Thank you.
A motion to approve the variance as outlined in the staff memo.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those will take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Nice looking place. Next up is a subdivision at 5945 Concord Avenue in Edina. And Planner Teague will be presenting.
Can you call? Whoops. Sorry, I don't know what's happened to our PowerPoints here. I thought I had them all open.
Assuming that was the applicant's PowerPoint.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Chair, members of the commission. This is a two-lot subdivision at 5945 Concord Avenue, located at the corner of 60th and Concord in the Concord neighborhood. This is just a block south of the subdivision that You all discussed at your last Planning Commission meeting, made a recommendation for approval. It did go to the City Council at their last meeting, and they did approve that. So just for a little background, that's just one block to the north. This is another look at the site. There's an existing single-family home, Rambler, on the property. The applicant is proposing to remove that home and construct 2 new single-family homes. As we do with all of our subdivisions, the minimum lot size is established by the median of all property within 500 feet. So this ring here represents that. So this median is quite a bit different from the subdivision that we considered last month, in that that was a neighborhood that was, the vast majority were 50-foot wide lots. This property is still located within that same plat, but it's right on the edge of the plat. So originally it was platted as a 50-foot wide lot, but it was developed with a Rambler over 2 existing 50-foot wide lots. So as you see, the properties in the plats to the south and to the west are larger, again, as part of different plats. So when running the medians, the median here, the area is over 10,000 square feet. The median width is 77 feet and the depth 135 feet. The medians in that previous plat was at about 6,800. So a little bit larger variances requested with this proposal. So the request before the Planning Commission again is preliminary plat with the lot width and lot area variances. So again, just to show you the history of subdivisions that we took a look at last time. Several in the area. I've added the previous subdivision that was just approved as number 7 here. So you can see the area of the subdivisions that were approved are predominantly in area where the vast majority of the lots are 50-foot wide lots. And the ones that have been approved to the south are in areas that have a mixture of oversized lots and 50-foot wide lots. Just to show you again some of those examples, this is one on Oaklawn that was approved adjacent to Pamela Park. It was the last on this block that was a 100-foot wide lot. So that was approved, subdivided, and 2 new homes exist there today. This was the subdivision that was just approved by the council. As you can see, on both sides of that block and the block behind, all 50-foot wide lots. So this is the property that we're looking at this evening. The applicant did make this same request back in 2012 that was denied by the City Council, recommended for denial by the Planning Commission as well. Again, you can see the larger lots to the south that adjust that median. Other areas where similar type subdivisions were proposed and denied, there was one on Oaklawn here and one on Brookview. Both of those requests were denied, again, because of the area contains that mixture of oversized lots. So primary issue for the Commission to consider are the variances met. In this area, in this instance, staff is again recommending denial, as we did back in 2012. The site exists with reasonable use with the existing single-family home. The lot is generally similar to the properties to the south. Again, there's an adjacent lot to the east that's oversized. These are quite visible lots on the corner, more in character with the lots to the south, again, oversized. The proposed lots are 32% smaller than the median here. Again, over 10,000 square feet is the median, and about 6,800 square feet are the proposed lots. Economic considerations can't constitute the practical difficulty in this instance. We believe the practical difficulty is self-created by the desire to subdivide the property. So with that, staff is recommending denial of the proposed subdivision, subject to the findings that are included in the staff report. With that, I can stand for any questions.
Any questions for Carrie? Commissioner Carr.
Planner Teague, I am correct, though, in that the original plat for this group of homes that was originally platted as 2 lots.
Correct. Yes, the border of the Fairfax plat that this lot is located in is Concord here and 60th to the south. So this is the far edge of that plat. But all of these oversized lots here were originally platted as 50-foot wide lots.
Do you know if, would this be before the ones to the south were done? Do you know? Yeah, it's a little.
I'm not sure of the timing
Just kind of curious.
which came first.
Okay. Commissioner
Planner
Thornton.
Teague, if you go back to the previous map, I can't read it because my eyes are actually starting to go bad. Across the street, directly across the street. So I think that's other side. I'm sorry, to the west.
west.
of the property. What are those? What are those lot
Yeah,
sizes?
these
on
are
those?
8 and 9,000 square foot lots.
It's like 9,300 at the top, and then 8 and 9,200.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Do you have some?
Just one question. This may be for the applicant instead of Planner Teague, but what is the use of the property that's impinged by the current status of the property?
The use of the property that's...
Well, I think, are you saying what can't it be used for right now?
How is enjoyment of the property harmed? I mean, what's the gain from subdividing? Well, how will the property be used better upon subdividing?
It would be more valuable as 2 separate single-family home lots as opposed to one slightly larger lot. The value here would be a little bit more, would be higher as a 100-foot wide lot than would a 50-foot wide lot. But 2 50-foot wide lots would be more profitable than one large lot.
Any further questions? Okay, thanks, Carrie. Oh, didn't see your
Planner Teague,
hand
one
up.
other question. I know you've got the radius, and I know that we take that into consideration, but it's not an absolute, that we always use that median that comes out of the radius, depending on where the radius falls.
It's always used if the medians are larger than 9,000 square feet is our minimum lot size and 75 feet in width. So if it's in an area where the predominance of lots are larger than that, then we use the median. So we would use it in this instance.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. If the applicant wants to step forward and give us a little bit of information here. Welcome back, I believe. I think a few of us were here, maybe 2 of us were here the last time this came through. Some new blood.
I actually have notes of the presentation, so it's not so much an iPad.
Go ahead. Yeah, well, that's fine. Keep
Good
going.
afternoon, Chairman, Commissioner. Thank you for having me on the beautiful night. It's good to be here with you tonight. My name is Jared Lindquist. I'm the property owner at 5945 Concord Avenue, and as you may have guessed, I've been working on this project for a number of years. It's been a lot of time and money and effort put into it, and I appreciate the opportunity to come back and present again for you tonight. I've been an Edina resident for 23 years, 19 years at this particular address. I've been involved in the community with several organizations within the city, and I'm back here before you again because I'm interested in doing what's best for the neighborhood. I'm sorry. All right. So I'm interested in doing what's best for, not only for Edina, but what's best for the neighborhood and my neighbors as we move forward with this property. My home was built in 1948. It's a small and really not a family-friendly. I live there by myself right now. And it's based on building activity. It's cost prohibitive to improve the home, actually. It's kind of a no man's land as far as improved development goes. And so the house ends up being functionally obsolete the way it is. And so it's not architecturally or historically significant at all. It's a post-World War II house that was built during that boom time, right after the war. And the reality is the lot is clearly oversized, not only for the house, but for the neighborhood. And we'll get into that a little bit more. As you can see here is a kind of a rough sketch of how the house sits on the lot. The legal description is lots 13 and 14 of Block 9 of the Fairfax Edition. The house, the lot line that used to be two separate lots goes down the middle of the two bedrooms and the bathroom. As we look at the neighborhood definition that was brought up just a little while ago, we talk about the 500-foot radius being considered the boundary for the neighborhood. And it's my opinion, and a lot of my neighbors' opinions, that this is problematic to describe this particular neighborhood, and we'll get into that a little bit later, in that the 500-foot boundary is kind of meant for maybe newer development, kind of western Edina as it was developed. And as we redevelop Fairfax, which has been happening, and certainly has been happening a lot in the 2.5 years since this came up before, and it really ends up being a kind of a better time, actually, to consider building two houses on these lots. As we account for existing lot design, how we want to move forward with modern business building practices, the 500-foot radius is not followed consistently to define the character of a neighborhood. And so specific recent changes to the city code as far as building on 50-foot lots actually helps develop the two houses as opposed to one in this case. And so I believe, as well as a lot of my neighbors, believe that the variance findings are met. And this, I won't read this to you because we've all read this before. This is actually a quote from the subdivision that was approved by the city council just at their last meeting. It was approved a month ago here. The main thing I'd like to stress is the situation is really the same. And we'll get into that a little bit down the line as well. But the requested variance is to split this lot and reasonable in the context of the immediate neighborhood. So the existing lot is larger. It's the biggest one, tied for the biggest, with just a few others that are around there. If you consider the lots to the south and to the west, none of them would meet the median either. They couldn't exist if you use the same criteria. And we'll see that visually a little bit later as well. So the practical difficulties are clear and very real. They do exist. And they're precisely the same as they were for previously approved subdivisions. We see here listed some that were recently approved, some that were a couple of years ago, but certainly some in the meantime. If we talk about the unique circumstances, once again, the circumstances are not unique. And in here, the only part I've changed is the two areas, well actually 3 areas, where you see the underline. The rest of that certainly fits this property. And the conclusion is that the situation is unique, because this property is unique, and it's not common and not self-created. And finally, we get to the character of the neighborhood. Will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? And of course it can't, because there's plenty of 50-foot lots that are built upon, and we'll see a couple that have been built upon successfully, and I think in character with the neighborhood, actually more in character with the neighborhood than building on one 100-foot lot. Here, right around the corner from my house, is a house that was built on a 100-foot lot. It's a great house. It's fantastic in every way. It is also huge compared to the house next to it and the house on the other side as well.
That's the one on
You have-
Ashcroft?
Excuse me?
Is that the one on Ashcroft?
That is, yes, 5825 Ashcroft, or 5925, I believe.
Okay.
Between 59th and 60th on Ashcroft, yes. And so you see a house with the house next to it, looks like the guest house. And that actually is not a small house. It's pretty similar in size as the house that was torn down and rebuilt here. And we'll take a look at the back as well. You see the other house to the north there. Once again, a great house. But does it really fit in with two houses? This is at 58th and Ashcroft, just a block and a half to the north, and just to the north of the previous approved subdivision from last time. And I show this one because these are two 50-foot lots that were redeveloped on a corner. And one of the questions that came up is, if we redevelop on a corner, how does that affect setbacks and things like that? How do we do that adequately? And you can see here, there's plenty of green space around there. Those are two 50-foot lots that were built successfully, and I think are more in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. Certainly more so than one huge house next to a small house. So I feel the variance findings are met. It's improved redevelopment with two homes, fits the neighborhood better, lower prices for families with lower prices of the resultant homes for younger families with children that are next to two elementary schools and a middle school that are right there. I've grown up watching the kids cut through my lawn as they go home, and I would want that the same for two new families that could live there. And the functional and aesthetic concerns are key to the neighborhood and the primary reason for overwhelming neighbor support. So we talked about this a little bit, and I'll just kind of go through that. You have the presentation in front of you. You can take a look at it and a little bit closer. So you can see here's kind of overall view, about a mile and probably a mile radius. If we look at the Fairfax addition, you can see with the green star, 5945 Concord is actually in that area. It's the southwest border of the Fairfax addition. And so this is where we get into problematic areas with the 500-foot radius as it applies to this property in general. The Fairfax addition was done far in advance of the other properties you see here. This is actually the first house that was built on the west side of that. The property just to my east predated World War II, I believe, actually. And so was the first house built there. It was gravel roads. It was kind of out in the middle of nowhere as far as Edina goes in that case. So if we zoom in a little bit here, you see all of the other additions that were done, and there was actually two lots that are kind of across the street there that were unplatted. And you see the school to the north and west there as well. So all of these additions to Edina kind of came together, but came after the Fairfax addition. So this is still part of Fairfax, though, and having lived there for almost 20 years, you do know that there are separate neighborhoods. There's separate feel to it. These are straight streets. The other ones are curved. The houses are of a different era, really. So you see the boundaries of the different neighborhoods, and really the way the streets work out, you actually don't cross over into these two areas. It's just kind of the way, it was probably the way the city kind of worked out when it expanded into this area. So on our block, we have 24 lots total. 18 lots are 50, 2 lots are 60, 2 lots are 70, and 3 lots of 100-foot width in this area right here. And you see the ones across the street, there's 2 60s that are in the middle and 2 70s on either side that were added at different times. So actually 2 50-foot lots is actually closer to the size of those, and one of those houses, 5932, is actually successfully redeveloped as well with a very nice design. On our block, you can see most of the lots, once again, the vast majority are still 50-foot with 300-foot lots. And on the west side of 59th, between 59th and 60th, you see my 2 lots are the only 2 that are combined. I did a previous neighbor survey, and I went around and talked to everybody at least 3 times. And I've asked, mainly because, some of the other subdivisions, as Planner Teague had mentioned, had run into trouble, and I wanted to find out what the neighborhood thought. And I certainly welcomed anybody to disagree, and some did. 8 were neutral, 71 yes, said let's go ahead and do the subdivision, 3 were against. This was at that time. So the neighborhood wants 2 lots, overwhelmingly in favor, fits better with the neighborhood, spacing between 2 houses fits every other house in the block, and redevelopment has taken place, and successfully so. So I've striven to do what's right for my neighborhood and Edina, and I know that what had been brought up last month was the economics of what we had seen, and this is my 2nd application. Situation is different. There's certainly more redevelopment and better redevelopment, and also some city code changes that have taken place that allow for better design of houses on 50-foot lots, as well as fitting them on the lots better. And so things have gotten better for building on 50-foot lots. I had a proposed design for 1 home. I paid for a design. I marketed it, and to try to build a smaller home on this lot, it does benefit me, as Planner Teague once again mentioned, to have 2 smaller lots. That was after the subdivision design, trying to make lemonade out of lemons in that case, and trying to build a smaller home that would be acceptable to my neighbors instead of just selling to anybody who would redevelop any house that they wanted there. In the end, it wasn't economically feasible to build a smaller house with a higher land cost at that time. It's hard to say what will go forward if the subdivision is not granted, but in the end, 2 lots is better for Edina, the neighborhood, as well as for me. And I've been working on this for a long time. So what does Edina get? You get the highest and best use for redevelopment, homes for 2 families that are right next to the schools. One of the primary things that my neighbors talk to me about is, well, we could have kids that move here, growing families with, right next to Concord Elementary, probably aren't going to buy a $1.3, $1.4 million house, maybe a $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 house. Those are the people that were talking to me about the house that I was trying to build, and it just ended up that they bought houses built on 50-foot lots. I know all these people. I talked to them extensively, as I was one of the ones primarily marketing it as the homeowner. So we get a higher total value investment, better for all of Edina as well, and homes that better fit the neighborhood. And I really feel this is an opportunity for Edina, and it's for the neighborhood and for 2 families that live close to their schools. It's a tremendous opportunity. When I was a little kid growing up in Egan, I walked to school, and then when we moved, I rode the bus an hour to school, and I know what the value of being next to your school is. Tremendous to be able to do that, and then spending 2 hours on a bus every day was a little bit of a problem for us. So the question before us today, and I'll conclude, is it reasonable to expect that the requirements of a variance are met? And I believe that a reasonable conclusion is yes, that they are met. So if we are put aside our previous events and things that have happened in the meantime, improved development of 50-foot lots, as well as consider what's happened in the recent past, we can consider what's best from a city planning standpoint. And the answer is, I believe, 2 lots versus 1. It's also what the neighborhood wants and what's best for them and all of Edina. Thank you, and I'll answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lindquist. Are there any questions for the applicant? No questions? Must have been a very good presentation then, I guess. I don't know. Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing, so anyone wants to come forth to the side microphones, the center if you have something to show us. comments, please limit to 3 minutes. You'll see a couple buttons up there that'll turn green, yellow, and red as you go along, and once you get to the red one, we'll ask you to wrap up. Are there anyone wants to tell us your thoughts? If you give us your name and your address, that'd be great.
Hi, my name is Raymond Sharp, and my wife, Raymond, is here. She's been a resident here of Edina for 43 years, and I've been here for about 10 years. Again, 5940 is the lot just east of his house, and our concern would be, as he has pointed out very clearly, the concern that the residents have in Edina is the size of the new houses going up, considering that the original houses were much smaller. And you've developed rules to deal with this here, where you have a limitation of 30% for houses on a lot that are 50 feet wide, and on like his lot, the restriction is down to 25 feet. But still, this provides for a house to be 67% larger than the one next to it with that guideline. And I just can't imagine you could be standing in front of our house looking past it, and the house over there would outline ours. And that's just crazy. If you had two new houses on those 50-foot lots and they were built to the maximum size, that would still only be a 20% additional square feet for those two houses. And those guidelines are good, and we were ahead of many areas in the cities here to do that. The concept with the 500-foot limitation for making a lot smaller, they're already laid out for 50 feet. The design for the whole neighborhood and area is 50 feet. And for many areas around it, it's 50 feet. Our lot being a double lot next to his, with that guideline, is prohibiting it, and that doesn't make sense. I mean, the 50-foot is a good guideline, and it should make sense, but if you're looking at a new area development that was not pre-designed, it would make sense. But it's being used in the wrong way in this situation. And someone mentioned about the value. Our house is assessed at $450,000. It's a double lot, brick house. If we subdivided that and sold it, we'd possibly get $450,000. There is not a real gain in this, but again, I don't think that the guideline is to prevent a homeowner from having a gain anyway. I mean, I don't see how that rule or profitability would even apply to this, especially since I'm next to this, where this huge house can go in. I've had a 6,000 square foot house before. I mean, they're common. And I could put one on our lot. That would be stupid. Why would we want guidelines that would permit that to happen? I mean, that's the whole thing we're trying to avoid.
If you could wrap up pretty quick, thanks.
Pardon?
If you could just wrap up pretty quick, the 3 minutes
Okay.
are up. So.
I guess when we're ready to sell our house, I would request it to be subdivided also, to limit the size of the house, because I wouldn't want to do that to my neighbors. And I think that's a driving motive he has. I don't think it's a monetary one. He's been there a long time. We've been there a long time. Our neighbors have been there a long time. That's the driving motive. And I hope the council looks at the goal we have of having everything fit. And it also will create more tax dollars for Edina, and it's going to be needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I don't think so. Anyone else want to comment? Last chance. Okay. Just made it.
I'm Jeff Johnson. I live at 5825 Ashcroft Avenue. It was my wife and I that were before you a couple weeks back. We met Jared 2.5 years ago when he was canvassing the neighborhood. When he gave that one slide that said, I canvassed the neighborhood, I met all of these people. These were the 81 in favor, and I forget how many, 7 or 8 neutral, and 2 or 3 against, or something like that. So that's when I first met Jared. And so I just have a couple of comments that I'd like to say. One is, this is a school neighborhood. We moved into the neighborhood primarily because of the schools, and I do think that 2 families or 2 homes would be better for the schools, and I think it'd be great to share the neighborhood with 2 families rather than 1. The other thing is, his lot sits in a very unique position at the corner of the addition. So across the street from him, across 60th, there's a different subdivision to the south. 60th is kind of a major street that takes people over to the highway, to Highway 100, where there's an on-ramp at Benton to get on. So 60th is kind of this major, not a major street, but a major for our neighborhood that kind of separates the north side from the south side. So it almost like it separates it into 2 neighborhoods of sorts. And certainly the houses to the south are newer and bigger than the homes that are to the north side of that street. So I wanted to say that I think that in analyzing the 500-foot ring, it seems like, I know you have to use the 500-foot ring, and it's important to look at that, but I think that you are allowed some judgment and have judgment in what parts of that would be more important. And I think that the northeast quadrant where Jared's home is, in a part of that ring, I think is more important to look at that. So that's just my view. And then the last thing that I wanted to say in wrapping up is that I know you have to look at the 500-foot ring, and it's important to look at that. And as Director Teague pointed out, when the median is greater than the 9,000 square feet or the 75 feet, that's the minimum lot size for the zoning class, the 500-foot ring carries the day with the median. So it's important for that. But I don't think that it's the sole thing that you look at. So I think it's kind of necessary but not sufficient. In other words, in logic, it kind of goes one way, but I don't think it's conclusive, is what I wanted to say. And so I don't think that it's a matter of mere numbers that you're on the panel here. I think because the City Council is looking for your judgment, and it isn't just a mere slide rule thing. We're not issued a slide rule or some calculator that we work with, but the judgment is important. And so I just ask you to kind of consider those things. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Motion carries. So bring it back up to the commission for discussion, motions, what have you. So if someone wants to give us their thoughts, or these other ones, Commissioner Forrest.
Planner T, could you tell us what the setback requirements would be then for a corner house if it were subdivided the way they're talking?
So on the, it depends, or it can depend which home goes first, because we take the average front setback of the home on either side. So if the middle lot were developed first, the front yard setback, they would have to match the setback of the home to the north, or take an average of the block. That would be their front. Their side setbacks would be, they would have to total 12 feet for the 2 sides. It could be 5 and 7 or 6 and 6 would be their side yard requirement, and then 25 feet in the rear. When the corner lot developed, they would have to, if the corner lot developed first, It would be the average of the block, because the lot to the north would be vacant.
So on a corner lot, at least they were subject to 2 front yard setbacks. Is that still true?
That is true, and as I look at the home to the east faces south. They would need a variance to build on that lot, because there's really no way to develop that lot
You wouldn't
without
have much
a variance
land left
in that
to develop.
case.
Yeah.
So they would have to come forward with a variance for a specific house plan. If the subdivision were approved, it would certainly be reasonable to grant a variance there. Now, the Planning Commission would have more say than usual in terms of the size of that home.
We've had quite a few corner lots come in.
We have.
To us.
Yep.
In this exact same situation.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, some of those have come in with basically 3 square feet that they can, not this one, but, I mean, unbuildable. Any other comments? Commissioner Strauss?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to compliment the applicant and the other, the neighbor. I found the presentation compelling and persuasive, and I had questions that I think were addressed, and driving the neighborhood, I think your points about smaller home, more homes, and the school, the character of the neighborhood were all right on point. Thank you.
Commissioner Carr?
I would also agree that I thought the arguments presented were compelling. I don't know what the rationale was for denying the applicant back in 2012, but my recommendation would be to grant the variance, and I believe they've met the requirements for a variance.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, part of the reason it was denied was having to do with the 4 corners. I remember some comments being it was different than the other 3 corners, then plus the 500-foot rule. I believe was a lot of the reasoning for that, thinking back a couple of years. Commissioner Nemiroff?
I am concerned about approving this based on the reasons presented, simply because it could create an incentive to do house arbitrage for similar houses in similar neighborhoods, and I think that would not necessarily be in the interest of those neighborhoods.
Commissioner Forrest?
I didn't support this the last time, and I can't do it now. I find your arguments compelling. I find them rational. I will say why. First of all, we aren't dealing with guidelines. We're dealing with state law and city ordinances as far as what we can use to make this decision. And we, in state law, it says that economic factors cannot be the primary reason for a variance. And I don't see other factors here. And that it needs to be a unique situation, different from other homes in the neighborhood or in the area. And it's not unique. Our city ordinance regarding the 500-foot law, we've kind of talked about maybe addressing that because it has been a glitch for us in the past. And I think it continues to be so. You're right. I mean, it was platted this way. Keep in mind, though, that 50-foot lots were platted for much smaller homes than what people are currently putting on these lots when they do subdivide them or when they redevelop them. I think that the setback requirements for the lot on the corner, as they exist now, again, would be prohibitive to build without a variance. When you talk about neighborhood character, it would be changing the orientation of the home away from 60th Street. The heights of the new homes, now whether you rebuild with a large home on the whole lot or whether you build on a subdivided lot, we're likely to hit that issue because the new homes are taller in order to get more square feet in there. And the houses on both sides of this property are currently one-story homes. We're not bound by precedent. We can't, in fact, we're not to consider precedent as far as it's something we can find informative, but because we granted it in one place, it doesn't mean that we necessarily would grant it in another. Every situation has to be looked at as a unique one. So those are my concerns. It just doesn't meet the rules, so to speak. And as much as I think it's a rational request, I just wanted to get that in the record that's why I'm not going to be able to support it.
Commissioner Hobbs.
Yeah, I guess I would just agree with a lot of the points that Commissioner Forrest raised, and I think for me that there's a reasonable use for this property as a single-family home, and it really comes down to that. I don't see a rationale really for granting a variance in this case.
Commissioner Lee.
I find the 500-foot radius issue problematic too, and I think we do need to probably put it on a list at some point to revisit. But we have to be careful not to discount it because we used exactly that in the last proposal to define the new platting. So if that becomes the parameters, then this is very much the requirement for determining minimum lot size, and the two lot sizes proposed will be undersized. Also, I drove that intersection, and there is something about the corner lots. The homes, actually, there's a lot more green space, and I think it lends to the character of that area. So on the corners, the homes set back a little farther, and you see the green space. So to me, it made sense that those lots were a little bit bigger, although it probably happened just by accident, but it definitely has created a character that exists today.
Well, I'm pretty much in agreement with the applicant here. I really believe in this case, the neighborhood was different at one time. The reality is that someone could come in and build just as that house that was shown in Ashcroft, the 100-foot lot, and that house is absolutely huge in that area. And someone can, by right, come and do that right now. I agree that 2 homes would be better here. Partially, they're going to be big homes. I mean, no one's sugarcoating that, but the reality is they're going to have 2 families. I think 2 families coming with new kids is good for the neighborhood, as do a lot of people do. And I think just having one big home there doesn't necessarily fit the character of the neighborhood either. That's not what's really on those other lots. And even if you look across the street to the other 60, 70-foot lots, those aren't huge, taking up the whole lot either. So, at least in my opinion, I would support this. As far as the setback requirements on the corner lot, we've approved a lot of those just because of the buildable area, and most of those have come through, and they're reasonable requests. So I'm not saying this one would be unreasonable. I'm hoping it'd be reasonable if it would come back, but we have done that before too. So for all those reasons, I would be supporting this. Any other comments? Any motions? Commissioner Carr.
If we were to make a motion to approve the request for a subdivision and the variances, typically that motion would be conditioned on staff findings. Now, right now, the staff has voted in favor of denial. So, Planner Teague, what would you recommend as far as conditions attached to a motion approving the subdivision and the variances?
I could prepare some findings here and give you some suggestions in terms of conditions. We would craft something similar to what we did with the Ashcroft.
Yeah, we could take, I don't know verbatim, but pretty close to that, right?
Yeah, it would, and a lot of the findings itself. Some of the findings on the Ashcroft included requested variances are reasonable in context of the immediate neighborhood. We could talk about the Fairfax plat, separate it that way. And in terms of conditions, watershed district approval, curb cut permits obtained from engineering department. They would have to come back for a variance for a specific house on that corner lot. Drainage plan subject to the engineering memo that was included also. I can come up with some more if you're ready to go with a motion. I'd be glad to help out with findings and conditions.
Commissioner Forrest?
So if a large house was to be built on that corner lot now, how would the setbacks then affect the building pad? Just curious.
Probably have to face 60th, wouldn't it? The new homes too, yeah.
So for the street setbacks, they would be required to match the front setback of the house to the east, and it does look like it has a similar setback to the existing home, and they would have to match the setback to the home to the north. And then with the side lot line they would be required a 10-foot setback along the north lot line and then 25 feet on the east lot line. So there is a good size buildable area for the one lot that exists today.
And in theory, they could come back for a variance depending what that area is, right? If it's buildable or not. You think it is. I'm just saying, with the corner lot, I don't know how it would lay out. So
with the 50-foot lot on the corner, they would definitely.
Well, they definitely need that, right? I'm just saying even with the 100-foot here, just based upon the restrictions.
It's potential, but you could get
potential.
Yeah, there's potential there.
Just a statement. Oh, was there Commissioner Hobbs? Excuse me.
I guess I just want to make the comment that, if one of the findings is going to be kind of relying on the old Fairfax subdivision, which is just kind of an artifact of how this place was originally built, I'm a little uncomfortable with that, along with kind of jiving that with the 500-foot rule. I get that this was at the corner of the Fairfax subdivision that was built in the late 40s, but the neighborhood is still the neighborhood. It's that whole area now. So I'm not sure that I'm worried about that as being kind of the foundation upon making a decision.
Commissioner Carr.
I don't know that necessarily would be the only foundation. I guess the question is whether these variances in the subdivision are inconsistent with the essential character of the neighborhood, and I would argue that they're not. Whether you look only at the Fairfax, even the properties across that were different subdivisions, I believe it is consistent because it's got many 50-foot lots to the north of it.
One thing I ask in this situation is, would you be in favor of combining 2 50-foots in this area to make a 100-foot lot? Reverse. Just something to think about. Could be done. Would they even need to come in for approval? No, that would just be done. That would just, so someone could buy these all day long and combine them. Commissioner Olson.
I recommend denial, and based on the conditions and the.
Is this a motion?
I have motion.
Okay.
I move to deny the application based on staff's findings.
Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? So we have a motion to deny, basically agreeing with staff. Correct.
I did want to say that I have that same reservation as Ian, that we have to be careful about looking at this as what is the practical difficulty, and is there some use here that is not allowed, the building of a single-family home. because there are going to be many instances, obviously, that we probably should be looking at in the future, or will be shortly, to subdivide larger parcels into smaller with the arguments that we are discussing today. So.
Any further discussion? Got a motion and a second. Jackie, if you could take roll call on this, that'd be great.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Nay. So a motion passes 5-4, correct? To deny the application. And it goes to council. Yeah,
This will also be June 2nd.
June 2nd. Thank you. So next up is the final rezoning for franchise companies at 7700 France Avenue. And that is a restaurant that we had come in for a sketch plan previously.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. This is final rezoning and final development plan of a seafood restaurant located at the 7700 site on France. This is the, as you mentioned, they went through sketch plan review and the preliminary rezoning, 17-acre parcel with the existing 6-story building, about 275,000 square feet. There's a bank out on the corner along France, about 7,800 square feet. The proposal is to construct the restaurant on the northeast corner. So this is a rendering of the approved preliminary plan. The Planning Commission recommended approval subject to several conditions, and that was that they were to make some revisions to the plan and bring those forward to the City Council. They did make those changes. So the graphics that you'll be seeing here were what were presented to the City Council based on your recommendations. So again, this was the council-approved plan. There was talk of making sure there was architectural features on all 4 sides, and they did do that, provide that rendering, as you see on the screen for the City Council that was approved. So this is a look at what is proposed. They've made some slight alterations, and I believe the applicant will mention some of those in their presentation, but they are generally consistent with the plans that were approved. So again, this is the second step for final rezoning to PUD. As part of that sketch plan and the preliminary development, it was recommended by Planning Commission and Council that this be a PUD. Currently, a restaurant is not an allowed use in a freestanding restaurant is not an allowed use in the office district. So it was recommended that they come in with a PUD to allow that. So there is an ordinance also in front of you this evening that establishes a PUD zoning district for this site. Obviously, this is part of a larger site with some potential redevelopment. So we're creating a PUD zone for this site. The underlying or the planned office district zoning still carries. We're just allowing a freestanding restaurant as a permitted use. So when they're ready to do anything else on this site, they would need to come back in and it would be an amendment to this overall PUD. So the primary issue here is, are the plans consistent with the preliminary approval? And we believe they are, and I'll point out some of the differences from the time that the Planning Commission reviewed it. You recall when they first came in, they were proposing to utilize the existing sidewalk along France, One of the conditions was the boulevard style, which they have revised the plans and are including that, the boulevard style sidewalk with connections to the existing building. In this area here, there really wasn't any landscaping proposed. The concern there was the loading dock, which is located in here, and just to provide some screening, we heard some concerns to the existing use, the office building to the north. So they're proposing this arborvitae hedge here, and so they have also beefed up the landscaping. Let's see, and again, with the four-sided architecture, the applicant does have a materials board this evening that they will present as part of their presentation. But with that, staff does find that the proposal is consistent with the plans that were approved on a preliminary basis and would recommend approval subject to the findings and conditions in your staff report. With that, I can stand for any questions you might have.
Any questions for Carrie? Commissioner Forrest?
You said that this site is bigger than just what's being occupied by the restaurant. Can you identify that?
The overall site?
Well, what is going to be rezoned?
The entire
PUD.
site is
Okay.
to be rezoned
PUDs. Identify
PUDs.
that on the
Yes.
diagram?
So it would be the entire 17-acre. So it's really the same zoning with the exception that we are allowing a freestanding restaurant as a permitted use.
And you said that if they wanted to do something else, they'd have to come back for an amendment, but here it says that all uses allowed in the POD2 zoning district are allowed, so they would not need an amendment if it's something that's...
If it were consistent, yeah, if
consistent
they
with
were,
POD2
correct,
zoning,
yeah,
okay.
if they were doing something within the existing building that's allowed in the office district, they can do that without having to come back in.
In the existing
If-
building, or could they could build a new building with...
That would be an amendment then to the PUD.
Even though it says that all POD2 uses are allowed.
Well, it would still come back to the, it would be
I'm
a
just
site
curious
plan
how this
review,
works.
and it would be, as part of that PUD, we would incorporate those plans into the zoning ordinance, whatever that might be.
Okay.
Commissioner Nemro?
I think this is a nice proposal, and I think it'll be a net positive for the city, but I do have a few questions about a few things. First of all, regarding, and I'm sorry if I'm new to the commission, so I'm sorry if I'm taking us back a step, but I do have some questions about the outdoor dining and perhaps about the traffic. The outdoor dining area, how will that be either integrated or separated from the sidewalk? And I'll explain my concern before you answer. People driving south on France Avenue, by the time they reach 7600, 7700, they've gone through several stoplights, and they're getting close to the 494, and they really want to make 494. So I don't have a study that supporting me, but I believe that that becomes go faster than the speed limit zone. And I'm concerned that if we have an outdoor dining area where there's alcohol served, and I'm going a little imaginative here, that there could be additional risks if there's not ways to ensure that people don't just go into the sidewalk, that they have to go through the restaurant somehow.
Yeah, and that's part of the liquor license that they would have to come, it's a separate process that they go before the city council, and one of the conditions is that this does have to be a cordoned off area where you can't just access from any point. So there would be some kind of a fencing or landscaping that would prohibit that kind of movement within that area.
Okay, and then will we talk about the traffic later in this meeting?
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look. The traffic study was done, and...
I had some questions about the study.
Okay, we don't have the traffic consultant with us this evening. That was addressed as part of the phase one, but the conclusion was that it could be supported here.
Okay. I mean, there were just... And I apologize if I'm taking everyone through a history, but on page A38 of the packet, the traffic, starting on page 835, a traffic forecast. I thought some of the numbers seemed a little low. For example, it has 6 people coming in or 5 people coming in and 1 car exiting in the morning, and I was thinking, well, you're going to be having morning staff preparing, the prep chefs, the early cleanup. You have food delivery, and I just wondered about the numbers, and then.
When putting those numbers together, the consultant has a direct conversation with the restaurateur, so they're getting direct input for what the kind of activities are going to be at the different times of day.
And there was one. It looks like an access, and there's an access in the middle on page A38. If you look at it in portrait. It's on the right, about a third of the way down, and it looks like the net increase in exits during rush hour are very limited. And if you look at the access towards the bottom, the south access, it looks like they're saying there'll be no people exiting that way, even though that might be a better way to exit and then go north on Minnesota Drive.
Francis.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
east-west.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes. The south access looks like there's no increase, even though that would be to exit onto Minnesota Drive would be a more optimal way to go north on France. As I'm looking at it, and I'm not a traffic expert. And it looked like, if I'm reading it correctly, that there's an estimate of 1,346 cars going south on France Avenue if nothing's built, but an estimate of 1,339 cars going south on France Avenue to the east access if it is built. Which is fewer cars going south on France Avenue if the restaurant's built. So,
yeah, I would have to have a conversation with our.
Okay.
I'm not that familiar with the specifics of the numbers.
Right.
The Minnesota Drive access that he's referring to is in this point here that exists as an access point to the north. That might have been what you were referring to.
Okay, well, thanks. I just, the numbers struck me.
Any other questions for Carrie? I had a couple of. Carrie, do you know, maybe it's a question for applicant. There's a bus stop right in front here. Do you know if that's accounted for in this new plan?
In terms of a new
Is it
bus
still
stop?
there? I don't see it on.
I believe it's still there, yeah.
I guess maybe I didn't see it on the proposed plan. And then is this still one property? Is this whole thing
It
one
is.
property? So that's what I was getting at with the PUD. So that maybe that answered my question earlier. So it would be a PUD of the whole property, which is the whole encompassing piece, correct?
Correct.
And this would allow just for that office, and essentially we're redoing that corner of it. Anything else that comes back would also need, by that PUD, would need to come back as well, correct?
Right.
Okay. Those are my questions. I have a couple for the applicant, but I think that covers that. So, anything else for Carrie? Thanks. The applicant wants to step forth, give your name, address, and tell us about the project. In particular, what's changed from where it had come before.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Commission, and thank you for your time. My name is Steve Faber. I'm with Frau & Shoe Companies, and to my left, to your right, is Alan Ackerberg, who's with Parasoli. If I just put something on the dais here, it'll show up on the screen, or?
We'd have to make sure we go over there with with the overhead, but it can be done. If you're going to use that, use the center micro.
I'll just, if it's all right, I'll just hold it up and show.
Well, it's probably better to put it on there. That way people in the audience or people in the audience can see it as well as it's being recorded.
Can I use your pictures here? Is that, how do I do that? If you could give me a site plan, that would be great. There we go. Okay. So Terry had mentioned a couple of changes. One, if you
Use the handheld microphone if you would there. Thanks. Hopefully it's on.
Testing.
Have to tell us.
Okay. We good?
Hang on. Are we good? Didn't sound like it.
Testing.
Oh, yeah, there it's on. Got it.
All right, here we go. That doesn't show up that way. But if you look on the plan in the area, how do I?
There's a mouse there. I can. Should be a pointer come up. There you
All
go.
right, right here, in this area right here, Carrie was talking about a few changes. Originally, we had some parking there, about 3 or 4 handicap stalls. They ran sort of along where the sidewalk is there. It was very difficult once you pulled in to back out, and you're going to be running into people. So we just decided to make that a green area, which the watershed district liked because we had less impermeable surface. The handicap parking is over in this area right here. You can see it designated right there. The other change we made, we were asked to not only put in the boulevard sidewalk, but they wanted to have it not be straight, so we put some curvature there. We have likewise running it here, put in some additional landscaping. We planned something, I don't know yet what we're going to do, but we're planning something kind of significant in this area right here. I don't know if it's a sculpture garden, some real lavish plantings, but it's important to Frau & Shoe Company that this building enhance what's there already and not detract from it or take away. And this is our entrance when we're not changing the entrance, so when you come off of France Avenue, not only will you see the restaurant to the left, but you'll see our building in the front, which we're making some changes to on the outside. But so it's important that this area right here sort of signify that they've arrived and they're on the campus. Some additional landscaping, as Carrie mentioned over here, and I just want to make note when we did this last time, that was referred to as a loading dock. It's really, there is no loading dock there. There's nothing that goes down. 18-wheelers aren't going in there and dropping anything off. It's more a utility van sort of area. The trash enclosure is totally enclosed within the building, which is this little piece right here, so it's behind a closed door right there. And you're going to have some Cisco trucks and some vans going there, but it is not a loading dock. The other change that was made to the exterior, oh, look at that, I did it. Kind of proud of myself. If you look at these areas right here, those are no longer going to be lights, clear story lights. Those, if you look down below, this is above the private dining room right here, and this area here is restrooms and things. And as we looked at it closer, it became difficult to make those areas where the clear story would have been aesthetically pleasing because we had ceilings in there. We had ductwork. It was a different condition. In the inside right here, from this point to that point, is the length of the main dining hall. So we'll be able to treat those clear story windows with lighting. It'll be consistent. It'll look good. When we got to the edges there, we couldn't figure out how to treat that in such a manner to make it look good. So we have the clear story now featuring the dining hall, so that's a change. The other change that I think is significant is in this area right here, looking out onto France Avenue. We used to have the bar right in front of that. We have full height floor-to-ceiling glass windows there. You sit behind those. You come in from the other side of the restaurant. You look straight out those at the patio here. And we used to have a bar there that would only be open 6 months out of the year or whatever, and then would have to be shut off during the winter months. And that didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. So we moved the bar over to this area. So the bar is going to be featured right here. And we took the lounge area that was there and moved it over here. and we have some seating here. We also shrunk the size of the bar, and to get to this gentleman's comment here, there are a lot of people on the Planning Commission and on the council that wanted the seating out there to relate to the streetscape. They were not concerned about the traffic, which I think does get, probably faster than we'd all like there, but they were actually asking us to provide some connectivity between the seating that's out there and the traffic, which we've done through the landscaping, but the seating out there is a little bit smaller than it was to kind of, it's still very evident, but to pull it away from the curb a little bit to address what he was talking about in terms of the proximity of the cars and things. But those are the changes, I think, in a nutshell. We're excited to be doing this with Parasoli, and we're ready to go, and I think it'll be a fabulous restaurant when it's done. So unless Alan has anything to say, I open it up to questions.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Olson.
I don't know if you can go back to that site plan or...
Uh-oh, now you're asking for a lot.
I know. You should. There you go, that's
Is
good.
that what we're looking for?
That works.
Okay.
That one works. I mean, can you use the mouse and just kind of walk me through? I wasn't here for I wasn't here last fall when you...
Oh, okay.
I must have missed that meeting. But anyway, can you walk through how cars access this site and then where the people would park and then enter the restaurant? And then can you also walk through like pedestrians and bike? Because we do, I agree that we want that to be an active front to France Avenue. And I do not agree with it being like walled off. I want to, can you show if there is going to be some access directly from France there? I don't know if you can do that with the mouse or what.
What's that? Yeah, I'm gonna do the bikes and the pedestrian on this one, and then I'm gonna jump to the bigger one for car access and things
good.
like that. So, well, we've got the sidewalk up here. I think the distance from the front of the patio to the sidewalk, certainly, and maybe even to the curb, is only about 30 feet. So it's like here to the wall behind you. It's pretty close. So there'll be a lot of excitement on the sidewalk and on the streetscape.
Is there direct sidewalk access from the sidewalk along France to...
No, and there isn't, as Carrie had mentioned, the liquor license, so they don't want people, walking into the bar area, grabbing a drink and coming out. So, people have to come in the front entrance, which is right over here, but they can walk up and down, jog up and down the sidewalk here. They'll be very close to all the excitement. Turn the corner here, go in here, go to the building this way. But here is the main entrance right here, and you come in the main entrance, come out to the bar area there. The bike, I believe the bike facility is right in this area right here where you park your bikes. And then the larger picture, if I can look at that. I think there's a couple of different ways that people are going to come. One is, I'm not sure what the street that's up here at the corner where Spartan Nash is, the stop-lit intersection there. I think people coming south after they've been there one time are going to stop at that stoplight. They're going to go this way, and they're going to take this path right here and come into the restaurant this way. There will obviously be other people that come south on France Avenue and turn in this way and come around here, the main entrance that's right here, and turn this way and park. People coming from this direction right here. We're going to have some signing right here that'll let you know that you've arrived where the restaurant is. But there are some people that are going to come this way. First time they're going to see the restaurant here. There's no median cut here, so they're going to come up to the stoplight here. Maybe they'll make a U-turn. Maybe they'll just come this way and come down here. And I think you're going to have some people, once they realize how to get there, that are going to come here. The light's green. They can take a left. Well, let's not wait for the stoplight up here. They'll take a left right here. They'll enter, and I'm looking, the curb cut is right here, and they'll come back at it this way right here. So I think there's, 3 or 4 different ways that, and then you're going to have people coming from the west of the project that know how to get there and have been there before. That are going to come over on this side from this. Oh, where'd my deal go? There we go. Going to come from this side over here, whether it's Highway 100, Industrial Boulevard, or whatever. But they're going to come down this way, and they're going to come in this street right here, and they're going to come in the back side and just drive all the way over there. You're welcome.
Yeah, quick. Commissioner Forrest.
Can you share your materials with us?
Yep.
Were there changes with that as well?
I don't know that there were any changes. There might have been some color changes. But I think this was pretty much what we had before, a brick. We're going to have a cementitious plank in certain areas. You've got the window mullions and the overhang that's above the clear story windows here. The cedar panels, but that'll be stained. It's not going to be cedar. If you don't stain it, you see it on like the fences, and it gets kind of weathered and it looks pretty bad. So that'll be stained, and it'll probably have to have maintenance every 3 years. They'll have to restain it to make it look nice. But we might have changed the shades of these a little bit, but I think pretty much everything that's there is what we showed last time.
Commissioner Lee.
To the finishes, I'm glad you brought the board. So the brick appears to have a real kind of purple-blue hue to it, but in the renderings, it looks very brick red.
Yeah, I'm not.
I think this is just it's a bad brick.
So it's more of a reddish brick?
Yes, it's going to be a color that is warmer.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I thought there was metal panel in stone at some point. No? No more?
That was, you're absolutely correct. In the original rendition, there was some.
Okay, so that gray stuff is now fiber cement board?
Well,
it's not metal panel?
I'm going to drop that. I'm going to hold that one. This is the side facing France Avenue. So the gray would be these columns, the accent columns here. Otherwise, it's all brick. Then you've got the tie backs here that are holding in kind of an eyelid. That'll be a piece of wood that will have slats in it that kind of goes over and shades that area there. So you'll have the gray here. You'll have the gray cementitious material with what do you call it? With the ribs in it or the reveals in it. Brick, and then this will be the painted cedar here, and then otherwise the windows.
So there is no metal panel then?
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Correct.
And then the part that looks like the old Target, the tan buff with the red, is that ephes? Stucco?
This part right here?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, Target looks better than that now. That's the old Target. Down at the bottom, very bottom elevation there, where you got the red stripe going through with the tan.
Oh, right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
that's
is that material?
The only place where there's no ephes, it's stucco.
It's stucco.
But
okay.
And it'll have reveals in it, a pattern of reveals. But the only place where that is this is looking from the west side of the building, looking east. Okay, and this is the kitchen that's behind here, so it'll be on that surface. And then if you go in depth this way, so you're looking from the north side looking south, it would be this piece right here.
Okay,
This
so
is
that's
where the
basically the
utility door is.
service side, and
The
it's going to be
service side.
covered up by trees.
Yep.
Okay. It feels to me a little underwhelming. I mean, there's a lot of materials on there for a small building. I don't know at this point if you would consider simplifying it a bit. And I wouldn't mind seeing some stone come back to it. I think that this has an overall quality of just, for being parasol and all, I was a little surprised. So maybe it's in the execution, but again, I think the brick is great. I like the brick. The color schemes are like something about there. A lot of color going on there, and I hope that they all relate. Hopefully the cedar maybe could be a dark stained, because otherwise it tends to look a little bit like Home Depot do-it-yourself trellis kind of cedar.
Right.
So you've got a darker brick going on there and a darker black metal window system. So I kind of I think that exudes a little more
I will share your thoughts with Stephen Roberts, who is the design architect out of New York, who's Phil's son, so I'm sure he'll pay attention.
I have to say, though, wow on the landscaping. Thank you very much, because I know that was an issue. And back to the seating, there is a drop-off in elevation. So the sidewalk is actually much higher than isn't it? Down
Correct.
to where
Yes.
the patio is.
Yes.
So there is
Yep.
that separation. In fact, as you're walking by on the sidewalk, you'd be looking down and seeing it. I don't know if our city regulations totally prevent this, but to me it kind of felt that it would be nice to be able to have some little offshoot off that sidewalk that would lead to that patio in times of good weather. I have seen in Minneapolis where they'll open the patio and you can enter directly from the patio. Obviously they'll put a gate and they'll put a hostess out there. But I think the reason I state that is because we're getting more bike oriented, and I realized someone coming down biking, potentially even biking or walking on that sidewalk, really has to come all the way around. And it would lose that spur of the moment, people looking down there saying, hey, if they saw that they could get on that patio, just come down that little path, park your bike there and run in there. So anyways, I appreciate on the southwest corner where you're thinking maybe you're going to do a focus or some kind of piece of
Some
artwork
sort
or
of
something.
sculpture
Very
garden or
nice.
something. Yep.
And it was glad to see that all that parking went away and you moved the handicapped out of there to
Good.
create that. I
Good.
think it's just going to feel like a nice little green island, which it sort of is now.
Right.
So it gets that back. So
I think
it's good.
I think there'll be a lot of electricity right there because that sidewalk again is where the wall is. It's not that far away. So
Yeah.
when people are driving by, if they see what's going on and they're interested in going in, but I don't know if your liquor license allows people to come in from the outside or not.
No, you can't.
The patio area is part of the licensed premise, and there
Okay.
has to be a barrier so that people can't get through that one way or the other. And one other factor, I agree with your comment, I think it'd be wonderful. The other part, it's an operational challenge. It doesn't then enable us to orderly seat people and sort of control, who's there. But
Well, thank you for the meandering sidewalk, too, because I actually biked that just this past weekend, and that sidewalk is, I call it a curb sidewalk. It is slap up to the curb, and it was scary just even riding my bike on that thing. So
Now you're
pulling
going to
it
have
in
to slow down though.
and putting some green between the road, I think is going to be very, very nice.
Thanks.
I just have a comment. If you could go back to the site plan overall.
I'll try. All right. Somebody took away the.
Uh-oh. It's coming back.
There we go. Is that one
I'm
good
sorry,
enough?
the full
that's
site
the
plan.
straight one. That's not the right 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 one.
Gotta be there some. There it is. There. Whoop. Next one. Or keep. Which? The way.
So okay. I've gone beyond my core competency. Thanks.
Down the whole project. Yeah. There. So, just a comment. I really love the project. I think it'll be great here. You guys do great work around here, along with bringing in a restaurant like this. They have so many other good restaurants around town, also. But just a comment, I guess, for also the planning commissioner as well. When you're looking at this, and we kind of talked about this, and especially with the Southdale things we're working on right now, but we're looking at this in a very small scale. We're only looking at improvements to this one corner of this site. So as we go forth, and especially if something comes in a PUD and it's with this, I would like to, and this is a comment for city and developers and commission, what are we doing with how does it fit into the rest? How are we making this accessible to the rest of the site? What's going on? Are there sidewalks you can get around the site as well? And again, a lot of those situations are probably, this is a little extreme because you're just touching this portion of it. But having said that, how does it fit in with the parcel to the north here? How does it fit in with even your own parcel? So just some comments to that. And as we see these infills coming back, I'd really like some more thought from folks as we go along as to not only how this piece works here, but how are you looking at the whole site to make it work better also? Because I think you're going to see that come up a lot more and ask that question, quite frankly, especially as you come in with a PUD or something. And, I'm guessing at some point this will probably be redeveloped. I don't think we need, 2 million car parks here, whatever's going on. But, as we do these sites, so I'm saying that in reference. It's not this project. I think what it is, and like I said, I think I really support this one. But just for future reference, as these come forth, and thinking about how the rest of it fits in with France and the sidewalks, I was even thinking, well, should there be a whole sidewalk since you're the whole owner of this? Should at least down to Fidelity Building, so we're at least covering pieces. But maybe that's a discussion for a different day. We are right now, but. Something to keep in mind, and especially from staff too, as we're looking at these, how do we make sure we're accommodating everything around these? So just a comment.
No, I think it's a good comment. I would anticipate that there would be additional development back in this area right in here.
Yeah,
maybe something fronting Minnesota Drive and looking out. And
as Toyota's paying you too much money to park their car there.
Well, as we go to lease those buildings, it's important that it has presence on the street. It's important that it's inviting, that people can recognize and get there easily, that they can, have some amenities and things like that, because there's a lot of great office projects up and down 494 where people can go. So they've got choices. So those are certainly important considerations.
Yeah, you're competing. Yeah, right, exactly. Yep. So Commissioner Carr?
Well, as I looked at the plan, the only thought I had in mind was about sculptures, and you addressed that you may have a sculpture garden, which I would strongly recommend. I think that would add value. So,
Mr. Ackerberg to my left here is in the process of moving through that. It's not
We're working on it. Yeah. We like public art.
Yeah, I think that's a great contribution. Yeah, and again, I think that as Commissioner Lee indicated, it's maybe the diagrams, but the drawings seem a little underwhelming, and the colors might seem a little garish, and I can't see the depth and dimension from these plans, and there may be overhangs that make it more architecturally interesting, but at least you have two members here indicating that there's a little discomfort with the plan. But
no, it's always hard to show that, but you talk about an overhang above the clear story. I don't know if this is the right terminology, but there's a Frank Lloyd Wright-ish kind of feature. So here's the clear story. It comes out, and it comes out about 2.5, 3 feet, goes up and comes back. So that, there's a number of things that are hard to see on the plan.
Thank you.
Commissioner Forrest.
I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Commissioner Olson was saying about the relationship of the building to the street. When I look at it this way, and granted, the name of the restaurant isn't up there, but it looks like it could be a retail store, it could be whatever, but it's like driving to Olive Garden and you kind of have to park in the back and then walk your way around or something, and it would be nice to at least, make sure as you're doing the interiors that you have that liveliness that the street can perceive. And also your specialty garden with sculpture or whatever, I love the idea, but I'm wondering if something welcoming and nice can be done on that southeast corner somehow to engage people so that they want to walk in or walk closer to the building there to get to the door or something. So it's just a thought. Just keep people engaged on France so that it's...
Okay, just to clarify, when you say the southeast corner, I mean, you're talking about this one here versus this one up here.
Right.
Okay.
It's been, now that you don't have windows there on that corner facing France, so it's kind of a dead corner, and it just is something to let people know that, yeah, I want to go in this way. I want to go into this building.
Yeah, I was kind of, not exactly, but kind of thinking the same thing as far as how do you engage from the street back versus, and I get where, when you're in the southwest corner, obviously anyone that comes in the front back door, how everyone sees that, but how are you seeing as you're coming down France and kind of working your way through there, and not necessarily just people on foot, but also people as you see the connections there, and that that is you've got the seating there, of course, but that is a really prime corner also to make sure that's well thought of. So it almost seems like that whatever this garden comes through all the way to France or closer to France than just in that back southwest corner. It's my 2 cents.
Well, I invite you to all come when it opens, because I've seen some of the interiors. It's going to be fabulous, and I've sampled the food that their chef Tim has done, and it's really, really good. So.
If there's public sampling, sure, let us know. Public sampling. Any other Commissioner Olson?
This will just be the final one. We keep hammering in this, activity along the street. I think one of the things that we get kind of frustrated with is that we do, have the buildings move closer. We do have activity out, in front of the building, but then you just can't access it. So it sounds like there's a law that we can't have. But I mean, that's just for the bar area, the lounge, outside. But I mean, did you consider at all to have any access to the restaurant, or is it even possible to have a door accessing from France versus from the back?
We looked.
Well, let me answer that. We did consider that, but one of the realities and the trade-offs still is that the vast majority of the guests are going to arrive by car, and all the parking is on the other side of the building. So we think that, by putting the door on the south side, it's a bit of a compromise, but we get the best of both worlds. It's not a huge hike for the folks coming by car. In the evening, people coming for dinner, which will be the predominance of our guests, they're realistically going to come by car. In the winter, nobody's really going to bike. Not too many people. My children will bike in the winter, but they're probably not going to eat at this restaurant. So it's kind of a compromise. I agree with you. It's sort of a challenge to have the doors on the street when you want to push the buildings up to the street and have active streets and engage them, but your parking fields are on the other side of the building. It is a challenge.
Yeah.
Comments? This is a public hearing, so we could maybe get to that next, unless there's anything else particular that comes up.
Thank you.
So thanks. Obviously, stick around. We'll maybe some more questions that come up. So this is a public hearing. If anyone wants to speak their mind, you're certainly welcome to come to the podium, get your 3 minutes, and tell us your thoughts. Okay.
I move to close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. So back up to the commission for any comments on this. I think it's a nice project. It's been here a couple times, and we've had most of us have seen it before, some haven't. So certainly take any questions or comments or statements from folks as they go. Commissioner Carr.
I move that we approve, or that we recommend that the City Council approve the final rezoning from POD 2 Planned Office District to PUD Planned Unit Development and the final development plan, subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Do you have anything to add beyond what's in there? Steph, okay. So it's been motioned and seconded. Are there any other comments, Commissioner Forrest?
Can we get something either in our communication with the council and the findings, it's very clear, or in the actual motion about encouraging, investigating, encouraging, implementing something to
engage the street more or something?
Yeah. Engage the street and either design-wise or landscaping-wise or something if they can't have an entrance on there. But that's still a really big priority for us.
Are you making a friendly amendment?
It need not be an amendment, I don't think, but as long as it goes into the findings, that would be great.
Okay. Any further discussion? Commissioner Lee?
I think that it is possible that there would be a way to put a path down there, perhaps to an alternate entrance, even if it has to avoid the patio area itself. But I have seen it where there was another way to get into it. And of course, you still come in, you still have to walk up to where the hostess is, but that might be one way to look at it. I do think that there's going to be enough activity, and for the big summer months or when the weather's good, people would walk down there and hey, why not? Let's stop in and have a drink. So there is some advantage to that. I just think that this was a good process. I know that you received a lot of comments from Planning Commission several times, and probably just an equal number of comments from the City Council. And I think this is an example of a process where it kind of gets tweaked. And I'm just really happy to see that those concerns were addressed, because I really read through all the notes all the way back and could actually track the changes. So at one point there was like, no, we don't even want to talk about a sidewalk, and now we've got a nice curbing one. So I thank you again. I just think this was a great process.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, unless there's last chance. Motion seconded. All those in favor of it say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thanks. So next, that concludes our public hearings for this evening. Next up is a sketch plan approval for the Edina Community
Want me to
Lutheran
hang on to
Church.
those for you? Sure. Thank you. Thanks.
So just Carrie, jump in here too. So the sketch plan, for those folks not familiar with it, we won't be voting on items tonight. This was a chance for the applicant to come in and solicit ideas both from the Planning Commission. Ultimately, I'm assuming they'll go to City Council as well for their ideas before they submit a formal application. Along with that, there wouldn't be any public comment session tonight, formal public comment session. Of course, if you do have comments, certainly feel free to write in. With that, if it does come forth and the applicant does provide a application, there would be the full formal public hearings at that time for both the Planning Commission and the City Council. So this is an attempt before things get too far along in plans or a lot of money is spent on either side, that they have a chance to kind of test the waters, if you will, of the city to see if there is support for the project or not, or any other comments. So I'll just throw that out there for everyone who may be here tonight to listen to the project. So go ahead, Carrie, and introduce it.
Yep, thank you, Chair Platter, members of the Commission. And I want to point out, too, that there was a letter submitted from a resident on the other side of the creek that's been handed out this evening for your consideration. So this project location, this is the Edina Community Lutheran Church. It's located just west of France on 54th Street, located along the Minnehaha Creek. It's a little over 4 acres in size. Here's a look at the existing church, and there's also a home owned by the church, the parsonage, located right here. That's proposed to be removed with this project. Again, a look at the existing church, the existing parsonage building. There's a lot of slopes and mature trees as the property falls down toward Minnehaha Creek. So what they're proposing to do here is build an addition to the church. It would be a new sanctuary on the south side of the church. The parsonage would be removed. That would be located right here, and then a new parking lot constructed right there. So I'll just briefly point out some of the details of the project and what the process that they will have to go through, and we can turn it over to the applicant. So this is a look at a rendering of the addition off the back. There will be a small addition in the front that would blend in with the existing building. Again, the applicant will go through that. A couple of more renderings from the south side, the addition here. The existing sanctuary, the maximum capacity is 210 seats. The maximum capacity of this new sanctuary is 210 seats. So as far as parking requirement goes, it's the same as it exists today. They did make an application, just to provide a little background here, back in 2012 that ran into 2013, an actual conditional use permit application It never moved forward to the Planning Commission or City Council. There was a number of concerns that were raised by staff and neighbors in the area as well. So this is a look at that rendering that was submitted at that time. You see it's kind of this square building would be the new sanctuary at that time. The addition was to go out the east side of the building and not in the back. There was a number of concerns in regard to the architecture of the building and it fitting into the neighborhood. This is a look from the back. You can see with the flat roof. Additional big concern was in regard to the grading and drainage. They were proposing a series of retention ponds within that slope and mature tree area. Staff raised a lot of concern, as did the watershed district. It's another look at, they were proposing some new landscaping down there. But the proposal this evening, in order to handle the drainage rather than cutting into that slope and tree area, they would be doing an underground vault underneath the parking lot, minimizing that impact. And the addition goes to the south, and they would be replacing the parking on the west side. So the process, this is a conditionally permitted use in our residential district, so they would need a conditional use permit. Based on the maximum capacity of the sanctuary, 210 seats, they're required 70 parking stalls. Back in 1992, and the minutes were included in your packet, the church did obtain a conditional use permit and a variance for the parking. Variance to 37 parking stalls, so that's the existing condition out there. At that time, one of the conditions of approval of that variance was a proof of parking plan. And so if there was a problem, once the addition was built, they would have to address the parking issue. And they didn't say specifically within that agreement how that parking would be solved. They threw out a couple of ideas. One was to utilize the city lot that's located over here. But that's quite a distance from the church and city property. Another alternative was to, with the improvement of 54th Street sometime in the future, providing some off-street parking, or on-street parking. And then the third alternative of doing some kind of a shuttle system, providing some kind of parking off-site. There wasn't detail on that, but they would have had to come forward. We haven't had to execute that proof of parking agreement to date. The users of the church do park in the neighborhood. We don't hear a lot of complaints in that regard. So there still would be a variance that would be required as part of that conditional use permit. We might want to tighten up that proof of parking agreement, create a new one with some more detail as to how we might solve that issue in the future. So that is an issue. Just quickly, some other issues that staff would want to see addressed. Concern with the adjacent properties and minimizing the impacts to the adjacent residents. So the landscaping here is important, in particular to the resident to the east here, providing screening of the parking lot, and in the winter months, the lights shining into adjacent properties as cars move in and out of the parking lot in the evening. Also concerned with the residents across the street in regard to cars moving out of the parking lot. We've suggested the potential of providing some landscaping on the adjacent properties and that the applicant work with those property owners. Also, this area in the winter months, we're hearing, is quite visible, so potentially doing some increase in screening along that south side. And again, we'll want to know the detail of the grading, drainage, how that vault is going to work, just what impacts there would be as this slightly encroaches in that slope area. Trash enclosure area proposed in this location here. There was a parking and traffic study that was done back in 2012 as part of that original. That would have to be just brought more up to date with a formal application. So I will stop there. Those are kind of a highlight of some of the issues, and I can answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Thanks, Kerry. Commissioner Hobbs.
Yeah, Kerry, it talks about permeable paver in that courtyard. Are they talking about that throughout the whole parking area or just in that one
I
area?
believe it's just in this area.
And is presumably that where the vault's going to be, is underneath that?
Yes.
portion?
I'll let them speak to the
Okay.
detail of how that
Okay.
might come in. But yeah, we would want to see more detail in that regard.
Right, okay. Thanks.
Is there any stormwater control in place right now? Vaults or anything?
Yeah, the applicant might
Okay,
have
just a question.
but I know there are some outlets
Or is it just
down
fall
the
to the
slope.
creek?
There's some catch basins that are directing drainage that way now. So there is some runoff going that way.
Commissioner Carr?
I'm looking at diagram A12. Maybe you could pull that up and just show me on that diagram what is the new portion, the new addition versus the existing building.
Okay, let's see.
There, that one.
Okay. So if I get that right, it would be this portion right here. So this is the side that faces the street. So this small addition here, and then approximately from this point back.
Okay.
So this would be the addition as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Nemiroff?
Just following up on this screen, in the, just immediately in front of the addition in the back, I guess that you put it, the highest point, is that existing or is that new?
This point right here?
No, yeah, right
This
there.
one, that's existing.
That's existing?
Yep.
Okay. And then how close does the addition get to the creek?
It's a little over 100 feet. The new plans that were submitted are not to scale, so I don't know the exact number. I just kind of took a, that's not working. Let's see. Yeah, these plans aren't to scale, so I took the old plans and kind of did a rough estimate of what that would be, and it is over 100 feet from the edge of the creek up to where the addition will go in this location.
Isn't the new setback, is it 75 feet or?
50 feet.
50 feet. Any other questions for Carrie? He'll still be here. So if the applicant wants to present what they have here, tell us what's going on and what you're proposing.
It's not a construction injury,
Thanks for letting us be here tonight. My name is Randy Moe. I'm with Benz Thompson Retail Architects. We're located in downtown Minneapolis. And just to expand a little bit on what Carrie was saying, what the church is proposing, the existing church that we're looking at here is a two-story structure. The sanctuary is located right in this area right here. And the existing fellowship hall is in this part. And the office area is up in this corner on the main floor off of 54th Street. And it's basically a full story drop from 54th Street down to this back side of the parking lot, which is the lower level. And then the whole lower level is essentially all educational and meeting room spaces. And and then the existing parsonage is here, which is no longer really serving its purpose for the congregation or the pastors and hasn't been occupied for a couple of years, I think. So that's the building, that's the structure that'll be removed. The proposed addition that Carrie was pointing out then is this piece right here is the new addition that's up on the front. That's a small addition. That's really a small kitchen that's being added on. This is the existing sanctuary that has this large cupola that sticks up now. That will be turned into the new fellowship hall, which will connect to the existing one. So it's really creating more fellowship hall space for the church before and after services. And then the new sanctuary is added on to the south. And then the whole, and the other piece of the upper level then is to, so it's really keeping everything basically the same on the upper level, except there's more. Right now, the offices for the staff and the pastors are spread throughout the church on both floors. So they're being consolidated through some remodeling on the main floor. So the main floor will be over in this area is all the offices, fellowship hall, and then sanctuary. The lower level, underneath the sanctuary, will be additional classroom and meeting space. And then the lower floor will be remodeled into more efficient use of meeting space. So it's really the whole lower level is all meeting spaces and classroom functions. The upper level is the sanctuary, fellowship hall, and offices. And one of the things that was, I think, this is such a striking site because of the nature of the way it works within the city. You know, it's got on the 54th Street side, it's really got the very rigid sort of grid of the city, and it connects to the very natural sort of environment of the creek on the south side. And in between is that slope. And that was one of the main reasons why we were suggesting putting the addition to the south rather than to the east, and using that as a way to connect through from the street, through the church, through the fellowship hall, and through the sanctuary, up on the upper level, really up in the tree level, to the south where the sanctuary is, or where the creek is. And that was really, and as part of that was in stark contrast to what was being proposed 2 years ago or whenever it was. I'm not real familiar with that part of it. But what seemed more important was to make it more appropriate and fit in more with the neighborhood itself and with the character and nature of the church that's there now, which is really very residential in character, even though it's a fairly large building. You know, it's larger than a house. But the materials are very appropriate, I think, for any sort of a residential neighborhood. It's a stone on the front, on the upper level, and then the whole back of the church then is really more of a residential lap siding. It's fiber cement siding, and what we're proposing then is the sanctuary or the parsonage is also built. The front of the parsonage is all stone, and it matches the existing church. And what we're going to do is when the parsonage is demolished, we're going to take that stone and salvage it and use it to clad the front of this addition here, so it stays in more of a uniform sort of coordinated fashion with the rest of the front of the church, so it all ties. So it basically should look like it's always been there. And then from this point on, which is where the addition starts, will be again repeating the same sort of residential siding that's on the back of the church now, where it'll be a lap siding on the big part of the sanctuary, and then these small pieces will be more of a shakes look. So it's a contrasting and smaller scale material to break the scale down of the whole piece. But then just tying in with the same sort of roof materials, the shingles, and keeping the scale down because it's down on the lower level, so it's not as tall, and then connecting it to the church, so it should be relatively unobtrusive from the street because it's all off and down to the side. And that's really the extent of the church. I don't know if I can find the site plan. Do we have a bigger one? I think that's it. And I think I'll have Tom talk about this a little bit. But like Carrie was saying, what we're also then trying to do, and one of the reasons, that with the sanctuary addition that's being built here, and that's removing some of the parking that was existing down in this area, and this parking lot, which will help form a buffer between us and the neighboring properties, it'll also be a way of replacing some of that parking. And in so doing, then this parking lot will essentially remain unchanged from how it is now, which in previous iterations of the project that came a number of years ago, this parking lot was being expanded, and that was really encroaching to a significant degree on this tree line along here and the slope, because the slope starts right at the edge of that green line there. So this is really salvaging many more trees than were being saved in the past. And this piece then will be also where the stormwater is being taken care of through the underground storage tanks that will really be from this whole length across here. And then, like Carrie was mentioning, the permeable pavers will be down in this area with the landscaping. And I think maybe Tom can talk a little bit more about the site specifics.
Sure. Chair Platter, Commissioners, my name is Tom Whitlock, President of Damon Farber Associates, local landscape architecture firm. Let's see if I can get to the... Carrie was so good at navigating this. The landscape plan. There we go. So a couple things I want to point out about the site. As Randy was mentioning, the new addition comes to the edge of the existing parking lot, so it's not pushing into that tree line at all. One of the things about the existing parking lot behind is that the service is back there. There's exposed dumpsters to the neighborhood in the back. So one of the improvements is to bring the dumpsters out here so the service doesn't penetrate all the way to the back of the site. And that will be appropriately screened per city ordinance. This parking lot has about 13 spaces in it. This parking lot will have about 26 spaces. I think there was a question about the permeable pavers. So this, as Randy mentioned, this site drops from 54th all the way back about 1 story. So this parking lot will also slope. So it made sense to have the permeable pavers on the south side where all the water is draining to. And then the underground tanks will be in that area as well. There's about a 35-foot buffer between the parking lot and that existing residence. And so we think we can get actually a few layers of plant material along that edge, an arborvitae hedge along that whole side, and then another layer of ornamental trees beyond that, which are shown here. So trying to create layers of buffer between the existing neighbor and that parking lot and the addition. We also wanted to be cognizant of headlights within the parking lot, so we're showing evergreen hedges along the south side as well to screen any headlights from going across the creek. We might have to push that a little bit to the south to make sure we have areas to store snow. If you look back at some of the original concepts that were submitted a few years ago that Carrie mentioned at the beginning, and you saw that there was a significant, almost that whole slope was cleared of trees and detention put at the bottom of that slope. So this concept really values all of those trees on that slope, and the intent is to maintain as much of that slope as we can, and we're really not trying to disturb anything along this edge. The only sort of encroachment into that slope is the south side of the parking lot, where there's about 12 trees in that area, mostly elm, box elder. There are 2 oak trees in that area. We had a great neighborhood meeting last week, and we talked to the neighbor across the street, and they pointed out some of the trees that they really valued that were in that area. So I think that's one of the things that we'd like to work on between now and the next time we see you is to have more definitive idea of what exactly trees we're saving and what the quality of those trees are. One of the other things that we're doing from a pedestrian safety standpoint is we're aligning these driveways at a 90-degree angle to 54th Street, which does not happen today. We're also pulling the parking further away to the south of 54th Street, so there's more visibility east and west at those sections, allowing cars to see pedestrians in both directions. one of the things that we heard from residents at the neighborhood meeting was, is there a possibility to pull the sidewalks actually away from 54th Street to allow a little better pedestrian connection across those driveways? So I think that's something that we would explore, but we still needed to allow for drop-off in front of the church. So I think that's sort of a spin. We've talked about a potential for a deck of some sort that extends along the south and sort of allows people to get into the canopy of those trees. So I think that's, again, something that we need to provide a little more clarity on next time with what the impact to the trees are in that area. So I think with that, we'd open it up for any questions that you might have.
Commissioner Hobbs.
Yeah, I'm actually, looking at this project as the potential to even improve the stormwater management of what already exists. So can you explain what your intentions are on the west side of the existing parking lot in terms of stormwater management?
So the way the site drains today is it sheet flows on the surface. There are a couple of drains within the paved parking lot area which outlet into a small swale above the slope, and we would maintain that today. We're really not adding any impervious surface on that west side. It'll be about the same of what it is today, because since it's all parking today, and the building addition actually goes over where there's existing parking lot. So the new impervious surface would be on that east side.
Mm-hmm.
So the intent is to really use the existing system on the west and then use the new system on the east.
I guess I'm just wondering if with the existing swale system that you have there, is that sufficient in terms of providing for infiltration before it just kind of cascades over into the creek itself?
Yeah, our civil, Rhonda Pierce, has looked at that and looked at the watershed district requirements, and that does meet those.
Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Carr.
I don't know. It appears that the building was built in 1949, based on your
Correct.
diagram. And is that true for the parsonage house as well? The reason I'm asking those questions is because I don't know if there's any building over 50 years might have historic value to the community of Edina. You did not submit any photos of the parsonage house, which you are recommending be removed. I don't know if that building has any historic value, but one of my recommendations would be that just because of it's a large structure to begin with, it's over 50 years old, that and you're proposing demolishing a building, and I can't recall what that parsonage building looks like, if it has any historic value, that perhaps we recommend that they run this by the Heritage Preservation Board. And Planner Teague, would you have any comment on that? Is that an appropriate request?
Run it by the Heritage Board in terms of, should it be saved? Should we photo document?
Well, yeah, both issues. It may, I don't know what, because I don't have a photo of it, I can't tell whether it has historic value or not, but because it's over 50 years old, it's a large structure, I would recommend going to the Heritage Preservation Board, the photo documents, that's important. But also they may have some opinion about the parsonage building being removed. I don't have an opinion on
whether
that.
they have the authority to mandate that it remain.
Well, they may not have
sure.
authority, but part of the variance request here is that's part of it, is demolition of that building. So I think that would be a point of information that I think would be valuable to the Planning Commission.
Commissioner Forrest.
They probably just run it by their consultant, and then if there's something unique or historically significant, likely they would just recommend photo documenting, and they may give some guidelines for that, and wouldn't be too much of an imposition.
Have the consultant, Robert Vogel, take a...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
I had a couple of comments. Just maybe you don't know offhand, but when you're building out this area, how many square feet are there today, including the parsonage, and then how many square feet would there be after, roughly?
How big parsonage is? The existing building on both floors is just over 12,000 square feet. Like 12,250 or something. The new addition on both floors is adding about another 8,000 something. No, excuse me. The two floors that are there are about 16,000. They're about 8,000, a little over 8,000 on each floor. The new addition is about a little over 4,000 on each floor, so it's going to be just under 26,000 square feet total on both floors. And I'm not sure how big the parsonage is. If I had to guess, I'd guess it's probably about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet on a floor.
Okay.
On a
So
footprint.
there's a pretty substantial increase in the building.
Yeah,
area
it's
here,
about
right?
50% larger.
Okay, I was
Mhm.
trying to figure that out. So along with that, and I think this is environmentally friendly, and you're along the creek and everything. I think this might be a great opportunity to not only deal with the stormwater on the east side, but also the west side. And I would suggest that you maybe talk to the watershed district, and they do a lot of grants and things. Here's a big opportunity for some more permeable environment on the west side, or something, so it's not. It looks like it to me. It's draining directly in the creek right now. It may not be when you deal with it on the east side, but on the west side, how are you creating a better situation than you have today with this when you're adding so many square feet here? That'd be a pretty strong suggestions from me. Is how are you going to kind of mitigate now the additional area of the building, but also the existing surface runoff in really relation to the proximity of the creek and what's going on over there and how that's being treated. A couple other things, I think, you are, I don't want to say hiding it, but it is, from at least 54th Street, it is minimizing the impact from that street, how you're doing it versus the previous one before. So I think this is a much better layout than you had or was shown previously from a lot of those impacts. But at the same time, how are you not only from 54th, but also from across the creek? And I realize you have kind of an open, your grade isn't your friend on the other side of the creek. You have that view. So impacts also from that direction. Are you screening that existing lot? It looks like you're screening the new lot, but are you screening, say, with arborvitae or something? So if it's more of a year-round, at least from the car standpoint, on that west side of the parcel as well. I do like that you're kind of creating its own trash enclosure, so you don't have that looking across from there. But how, and I'm sure you're doing it, but looking at it from all different angles and not just the street angle, and how that impacts the neighborhood, the creek. How do we keep that the best we can back there, as remote as possible also, and not only just in the summer view, but also in the winter view, what can be done to help mitigate that also. Yes. Commissioner Forrest.
Yeah, under our current ordinances, it's trash is supposed to be completely screened from any R1 property. So, it shouldn't be showing as it is. I think a lot of this is lovely. There's a little discrepancy between the elevations and that overhead rendering as far as windows on the new addition on the 54th Street side, but it's not a big deal. This is a sketch plan. I totally get it.
Yeah, well, they haven't caught up with one another quite yet.
Yeah, no,
but
that's fine. It's a unique treatment that's showing on the elevations too. I think bike parking would be nice and important. Lighting has got to be really
I forgot
the
to
great
mention
modern
that.
stuff that
Cut off parking lot
eliminates
lights and things.
Yeah, the parking lot and the security lights and everything need to be, however they do it, downward, whatever, screened from the nearby residences. I like the trash location better, though, definitely because it's closer to the street. There's less of the beep, beep, beep backup that can bother the neighbors. I don't like to see mature oak trees lost either, but I understand that it's a significant project here. My big concern is parking. It's really a bugaboo because right now, 54th Street is a designated bike route, and it's, I don't know if you have an agreement with the city now where you park on 54th on Sundays. Some of the churches have that. it's bothering me. I don't like over parking though either. I don't want things to be extra parking if you don't need it. But on the other hand, that's my big concern. I don't know how you could address that, even for large events, a big wedding or something like that, where your sanctuary is filled to capacity. That's something to think about before you come back with the application. Just really consider what your alternatives are to address that.
Other comments? Commissioner Lee?
I was just giving some additional thought about the tear down part now. It actually, on my pad, looks just like a very small residence. Not much significance. But on the other hand, for residential properties, we don't generally, do we go through any process where we have them vetted as for historical significance? I mean, in some ways, that's, they're tearing down something on the property. I don't know that.
Well, it's just, this is part of a conditional use permit, so in the process of requesting that, we can impose certain conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And again, since the applicant didn't submit any photos, only plans of the proposed building, I just think it's wise to check into that. And it would be, again, a point of information in reviewing the entire application.
So the request would be that they get in contact with the
Heritage Preservation Board with photos and the proposed plan that's been submitted here for historic analysis. See if there's any issues and whether there should be photo documentation. They may have other recommendations.
Yeah, we have a consultant that works with the Heritage Board. We could have them take a look at it and take some pictures and give us a little one-page report kind of thing.
Okay.
Anything else? Commissioner Nemera?
I have more of a comment. I mean, I commend the work you're doing. I think you don't necessarily have the deck of cards that an architect would like all the time. I mean, you have a 60-year-old building that was built for a certain clergy, a certain membership size. It's grown, and the neighborhood's grown, and the uses have grown. I think you're. I think they're trying to do a nice balance of trying to accomplish everything. If there was one thing, this is kind of the way my mind works, is if there was if when you came for approval, if there was like a punch list and said, well, here are the neighborhood concerns we've heard, and here's how we've addressed them as best we could. That's just how my mind works. That would be helpful to me.
Mm-hmm. Did you have at your neighborhood meeting, how many folks were there?
It was about a dozen. Wasn't it 12 to 15, I think?
Okay.
I think some of the, I think there's certainly a lot of concern about the trees.
Yep.
I think there were some concerns about, how people get into the lots. I'm trying to think of other major comments that came out of that.
Kind of the same thing, and kind of talked about a little bit, and it really is what 54th Street is, but, as you've probably heard for the rest of our discussions, however we can make it more bike pedestrian friendly, and I realize, we're not oblivious, most people probably will drive here yet, but how can you accommodate those other folks that either walk from the neighborhood or bike from different areas, that it's welcome and inviting, and it's not some bike racks that are stuck around, you got to search 3 hours to find them. How that should be, just as you can see parking, you should be able to see the bike areas and bringing in for that.
If I could give testimony on that.
Okay.
Because I walk and bike and run near this church a lot, and it is a problem on Sunday, but on Sunday mornings. But the other days of the week, I've never had a problem. It's an easy place to go by. That's Planning Commission testimony.
Thank you.
Well, just the comment, I rode my bike to the doctor this morning, and doctor of all places, I had to ride my bike around twice around the building to find out where the bike racks were. But anyway, so I just don't want I guess I was very non-observant too, but they certainly weren't jumping out at me. So, Commissioner Forrest.
Oh, I was just noting too that there's going to be an additional curb cut here too. So, and if you have cars parked along there on Sundays and you have 2 curb cuts, and then you've got the bike route with people out biking on a nice Sunday, It's just something that I'm sure the traffic study will look at, but that we need to be aware of when we discuss it in the future.
Isn't there a curb cut for the parsonage right now, or not?
Well, I suppose there would be for the parsonage.
Yeah.
Never mind.
So it's probably
Probably a
wash.
wash. Okay. Except people wouldn't be zipping in and out of the parsonage
True.
driveway
Yeah,
as
I
much.
understood. Yeah. You have. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I think I have to echo Commissioner Forrest's comment about parking. It's the big problem. I was on the finance committee of another church, and I'll tell you how much time and money goes after addressing parking issues. So I don't think there's the solutions to pave further or build gigantic retaining walls, but certainly to have a viable plan in place if the parking situation deteriorates or becomes more challenging, I think would be very well received.
Does that help you?
It does. Thank you.
So, do you have any comments on the comments or anything? Anything that you're questioning or?
No, I don't think I don't think I do. I like the idea of getting. We've always been planning bike parking, but we'll make sure that it's in a prominent location. For sure.
No, I think they're very good comments, and we'll seek to address them when we submit.
Okay. Thanks
Great.
again.
Thank you.
And see you sometime.
Sometime, I hope.
Thanks. So that concludes reports, recommendations. Up next is correspondence and petitions. You have the attendance and the council report in your packets, I believe, and most of you are doing really well in attendance. Commissioner Forrest, even. So.
Is that a shot?
Well, we have a
You're
little
going to
running.
make people wonder why you said that, like I'm never showing up or something.
Yes, you're here almost all the time, just like I am. So it's who doesn't come first. Next up is chair and commission comments. Any comments? Southdale, any updates from anyone?
I would guess that in search of the Southdale group that's meeting, actually we've made a lot of progress, had very good meetings. We are meeting frequently. We're going to be meeting again this Monday.
You know what you
right?
signed up for here?
Tuesday. It's all a blur. So we'll meet again Tuesday, and again, those meetings are open to the public. So encourage folks to come and tell us what they're thinking. Because we've gotten a lot of good feedback thus far. We're trying to incorporate that into some basic principles about what we're imagining can happen in the Southdale area.
What's your next step? Is that to go to, I mean, I think, either like a joint work session with council and planning commission or something for their comments as well before you kind of publish it, or
I think it'd be
what's
November.
Well, I mean, at the same time, when we went forward with this, we were looking for a product, or at least some kind of product sooner than later to help us out. So I just was curious where how that's progressing right now.
Yeah, I mean that's the next the next
yes is the answer.
Yes is the answer.
Yeah, we've been trying to get the council together. It's difficult. Their schedules are extremely busy. So we thought we might try the 1-on-1, 2-on-2, let them know where we're at, and get some feedback and input that way.
And we'll have a workshop eventually.
Yeah, we're always here too, so we can fit you in. Probably easier than the council, although it obviously needs to go to the council as well.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yep. You're right. Though the intent though is to stop here along the way.
So the next step is to move into phase 2, but we have to get feedback from
We'd like
the
to
planning
see end
commission
of
and the
phase 1
council.
first,
Right.
right? Though.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Great. Any other comments? Do you have one? So I just said a couple things and sent out an email not too long ago. Southdale Walk. Did you guys get any dates to carry? I think we talked about doing one of the 2 June dates. If anyone has any preference.
Yeah, I probably haven't heard from enough to settle on a date.
Settle on
yet.
anything. That was What were the dates again? So
My
doesn't matter to
recollection
me.
was the 10th seemed to be working better for folks.
Either date was okay for me. So.
Maybe just do the 10th? Because we'd have to notice it really quickly here, or fairly soon if that's the case. Before the planning commission meeting, assume it's not a thunderstorm or something either, we could push it out. But
Yeah, I think that was sort of the point in favor of the first meeting in case there was bad weather. We
Oh,
could
you
still
get the next
have
one,
do
too?
the 24th, yeah.
And, we can discuss it next meeting too, but my thought was that, part of us could park at south end and give rides to the north end and walk back and forth, or however we want to do that, because, we'll have a meeting at 7 that night, so I'm guessing we probably don't want to walk both ways, not that we couldn't, but just from a time standpoint, it might be easier to carpool a little bit back and forth there.
I think we should try to cross France.
Well, that's it. And yeah, I'm open to any routes. I could kind of make one up and draw one up and see what people think and kind of get, a little bit on the promenade and across those new developments. And Carrie, if we do that, could we get a little, at least a little insight into the, like the apartments on Southdale that are open now, and just to take a quick glance through those, or as kind of on the way through there. And of course, we invite all the council members and the public if they want to show up.
Sure,
We'll see who comes.
See if we can get in there.
And then, did you talk to the Heritage Preservation Board?
Yes, they have a. We were kind of hoping for June. It might slide into July. We wanted to coordinate it where they've got an overlay. A resident has come forward and wants to do an overlay zoning and establish a plan of treatment for that site. So we're trying to coordinate that so it's on the same day as an agenda item, and do the work session beforehand, and it'd be a big heritage preservation evening. Right now, we're looking tentatively at our first meeting in July, if that's okay.
Gotcha. And then also, and said Cindy Larson, and it could be other folks, just come and give us an update on what's going on the residential front, what they're seeing if the, some of the ordinance we were looking at, kind of give another update. We've done this a couple times, especially there's a lot of new members here, to kind of give a sense for if what we did make sense, or they're still seeing a lot of stuff out there. That could be whoever member of staff with that, if it was just in the sense that's kind of her biggest piece for that.
That's the tear down expert.
Yeah, yep. She's hired from money from demolition fees, essentially. When did we set that up?
Yep.
And then
she's really busy right now. Things are really busy.
Doesn't seem like it's slowed much. And then is there anything else that folks want to see, or people to come in? City present updates.
Well, did I see on the last city council meeting they deferred again? Was it 7,200?
I believe so.
To
the motion on there was to deny. Then I think it said deferred in the fine print, didn't
continue
it?
The
Continue
denial
on, right.
motion to June 16th.
16th, yeah. So that means still status quo. We don't really know where that project stands. Mm-hmm.
Any staff comments?
Just wanted to mention that the council approved on first reading the zoning ordinance amendment that we've all been working on here over the past several months. Really they made one suggestion on a change, and that's the definition of the window well.
Of course.
So given everything else that was involved with that ordinance, that's pretty good. So nice job. That'll be on for second reading at their next meeting. So Roger was coming up with some language
for the window well
to better define window well. Okay. The intent is still the same as what was.
So what happened with the R1 and the R2 piece? We voted that out separate.
Right. I didn't bring that forward to them.
Oh, you didn't go forward yet. Okay, gotcha. Okay. Anyone else? Otherwise, we could be done. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. I'm sure nobody will say nay, so I won't even bring that up. Yeah, we don't need to roll one on that one. Thanks, everyone.